Chapter 30-39. The Demon's Decision 1. What made Lung Ruoxue not know whether to laugh or cry was that other than the evildoer's occasional gasp, the adults, the little child, and even Song, who had been kicked away by the evildoer but had come back home on his own, were all more nervous than her, a pregnant woman. Although she had a child, Lung Ruoxue was still very calm, except for being a little surprised when she first heard the news. However, in the eyes of the head butler, Ji Kai, her calmness was rather abnormal. When she had nothing to do, Ji Kai would always sneak a glance at her with a worried look. The evildoer, Green Vessel, and Song would not leave her side. It was rare for evildoer and Azure to quarrel less. The human and the beast seemed to be getting along much more harmoniously, but for some reason, Lung Ruoxue preferred to see the moment when the two of them were in high spirits when they were bickering. How energetic were the two of them when they were like that? But now, their mental energy was highly tense. In reality, Lung Ruoxue really didn't want them to be like this, because she was very clear that she was in a very good state. 3 months later, the diligent head butler reminded Lung Ruoxue that it was time for her prenatal examination. The moment Lung Ruoxue heard this, her face turned green. A prenatal examination? She wasn't an ordinary human being. Why would she need a prenatal examination? You bastard! She hated going to the hospital. Under Lung Ruoxue's intense gaze, Ji Kai bravely withstood it. Although at this moment, he was so nervous that he was sweating profusely. However, he felt that he was doing this for his wife's good and for the baby's health. Therefore, he had a clear conscience. But why was her heart beating so fast? I'm doing this for your own good, Ji Kai said carefully. After that, he started to talk about the benefits of a prenatal examination to Lung Ruoxue. Evildoer, Green Vessel, and Song were also lectured by the side. After listening to the story, the two people and the cat turned their eyes to Lung Ruoxue. Their meaning was obvious. Go to the prenatal examination. Looking at their expressions, Lung Ruoxue's heart was boiling with anger. At this moment, she could no longer care about the evildoer's fragile emotions. She only smiled faintly and said, "You also think I need a prenatal examination? Sure, the prenatal examination is for the health of you and the baby." Knowing that his wife was in a bad mood, the evildoer was very careful when he said this. "Sister, go and check it out," Qingju said worriedly as well. He could not help but look at Lung Ruoxue's still flat stomach. "Girl, I heard that all the women in this world have to go for a prenatal examination, so let's do as the Romans do." Azure also persuaded. "I said, I'll fight whoever asks me to go to the hospital." Lung Ruoxue reminded him with a dark expression. "We're doing this for your own good," the 3 humans and 1 beast said in unison, their faces full of grievance. "I know my own situation. The child is doing very well," Lung Ruoxue said with certainty. She had been communicating with her child every day. "Madam, you're more than 3 months pregnant, but your belly hasn't grown at all. I'm worried that the child is developing slowly. You'd better go for a checkup." Ji Kai gathered his courage and finished his sentence in one breath. Who knew that just as he finished his sentence, before Lung Ruoxue could even get angry, the demon, Green Vessel, and Azure were the ones who got angry first. "You're quite bold to look at my wife's stomach. You dare to look at Big Sister's stomach? You dare to look at Nyo's stomach?" The 3 of them said in unison. Ji Kai's face paled in fear. "I am just worried about my wife," Ji Kai explained in a low voice. He was so regretful that his intestines had turned green. Why did he have to be so honest? Thanks. Green Vessel and Azure also nodded in agreement. Ji Kai, who had just escaped death, nodded repeatedly. How could he get rid of this feeling of escaping death? With this, Ji Kai didn't dare to say anything else. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue calmly spoke. "Have you ever heard of a god going to a normal human hospital for a prenatal examination?" The 3 men and 1 beast shook their heads. "The X-ray at the hospital is better than our internal vision?" Lung Ruoxue asked again, satisfied. The 3 humans and 1 beast shook their heads again. "If that's the case, what's the use of a hospital to me? Not to mention that I won't go to the hospital for a prenatal examination. Even if I'm going to give birth in the future, I won't go to the hospital either," Lung Ruoxue said stubbornly. After hearing this, evildoer, green vessel, and Azure finally reacted. Were they gods? How could they be the same as humans? They really didn't need to follow the model of ordinary humans. What prenatal examination? Go play somewhere else. The hospital would not be able to earn their money. However, Ji-kai knew that his wife didn't want to go to the hospital, but how could he not go to the hospital when giving birth? Ji-kai wanted to say a few words of advice, but before he could say anything, Lung Ruoxua stopped him with a sharp glare. Many words were stuck in his throat. He didn't dare to say them, but he couldn't swallow them down. His face was red from holding back his words. By the time he couldn't take it anymore and coughed violently, Lung Ruoxua had already gone upstairs. Evil demon, green vessel, and Song followed after her, leaving Ji-kai in the living room. He was coughing so hard that his face was red. Ji-kai coughed so hard that tears came out. He felt wronged. He had always been thinking for his wife. Why did no one understand him? The pain of not being understood by others was really unbearable. Whoa. From that day on, Ji-kai always wanted to say something when he saw the evildoer, but he hesitated, as if he had a stomach full of words to say. However, the evildoer was always with Lung Ruoxua, and he never had the chance to speak to his master alone. This fact made Ji-kai so anxious that he was on fire. However, opportunities were always given to those who were prepared. Therefore, after Ji-kai had planned for a long time, he finally found an opportunity. It was an afternoon, and Lung Ruoxua was taking a nap. As a filial husband, the evildoer went downstairs to prepare something for his wife. After Ji-kai finally caught his evil master, he started to persuade his master with all his might. He told his master that when his wife gave birth, she had to go to the hospital to be safer. The demon was a little embarrassed. It's not that easy to change my wife's decision. Besides, the last time he went to the hospital with his wife, the doctor who examined his wife seemed to be a man. He felt very uncomfortable to let a man help his wife give birth to a child. He could definitely do what other men could do. I don't want to find a male doctor to help my wife have a baby. The evildoer replied honestly after some thought. Master, there are many female doctors in the hospital. Ji-kai was speechless, but he still answered honestly. No. Even women. After thinking about it for a while, the demon felt that he couldn't bear it. As long as he thought about the possibility of his wife's body being seen by others, he would go crazy. Ji-kai was speechless. He had discovered that the evildoer master was no less difficult to deal with than the madam. Chapter 30-40. The Genius Decision 2. I've decided I'm going to give birth to my wife myself. After a while, the demon who had been deep in thought suddenly said. Ji-kai was dumbfounded. He didn't mean it that way. When he finally reacted, Ji-kai quickly said, Master, do you have medical skills? Isn't it just taking in a new student? Is there a need for medical skills? The demon was puzzled. He and Shu'er were both gods. There was no need to learn any medical skills. Ji-kai was speechless for a long time. After a long time, Ji-kai took a deep breath and said, Master, it's said that a woman giving birth is like passing through the gates of hell. So a doctor's medical skills and experience are very important at that moment. If you don't have medical skills, I really don't recommend you to do such a dangerous thing. After all, it concerns Madam's safety. I see. Then I'll go and study medicine. By the way, I know where the door to hell is. When I'm free, I'll go to that place for a stroll. It's not as scary as you think. After the demon finished speaking, he took a glass of milk and some snacks, left the dumbfounded Ji-kai, and went upstairs again. The owner of the gate of hell knows her, and often goes there. Not scary. After the evildoer had left for a long time, these words echoed in Ji-kai's heart. He truly felt that his knowledge was still too shallow. Otherwise he would not have been so easily intimidated. Ji-kai was worried. He didn't need to think to know who the owner of the white lightning was. Why was that little white cat so unadorable? She even took pleasure in beating him? If he hadn't been to the gates of hell, did that mean he hadn't seen the world? After all, was that place a place that anyone could visit if they wanted to? Only the dead could go there, right? Ji-kai shivered. He felt that he hadn't lived long enough, so he definitely wouldn't want to go there. Whoever wants to go can go. He wasn't going anyway. Ji Kai turned around and went back to his room depressed. When Lung Ruoxua woke up, the evildoer reported his decision to her. When Lung Ruoxua heard that the demon was going to study medicine, so that he could help his wife deliver a baby in the future, she was silent for a moment. Then, facing the demon's gaze that was asking for praise, she nodded and stroked his head. Learn well. Your wife's future children will all depend on you. Don't worry, my dear wife. I'll definitely work hard. The demon promised. He then stared at Lung Ruoxia's stomach for a while before continuing. Shui, is our child obedient? Did he disturb you? The baby is very obedient. He didn't make a fuss at all. Lung Ruoxia's entire body exuded a motherly glow. In her opinion, the little life in her stomach was much more obedient than the four at home. At least the baby loved her and wouldn't do anything. That's good. If he dares to mess with you, I'll beat him up. The demon clenched his fist and shouted. That's your baby. Lung Ruoxua was speechless. The child was not even born yet, and the father was already saying that he was going to beat him up. What would happen if the child heard this? Then she quickly rubbed her belly and comforted. Good baby, your silly father is just joking with you. He can't bear to beat you up. I'm willing to beat up anyone who makes my wife suffer. I don't care who he is. The demon did not cooperate with his wife's words at all, and said very seriously, Thanks, I want him to hear me so that he won't torment you. The demon said as he pulled Lung Ruoxia's hand and held it in his. All right. However, if you hit our child, my heart will ache. Lung Ruoxua, who was at her wit's end, could only remind him of this. Honey, is the child more important or am I more important? The demon couldn't help asking. You're important. Lung Ruoxua coaxed. Then will you be angry at me because I aborted the child? The demon asked again, worried. What's the matter with this score? If it's the children's fault, I'm sure I won't be angry. Lung Ruoxua replied honestly. Then I'm relieved. As long as he doesn't make any mistakes, I won't do anything. But once he does, I'll teach him a good lesson. The demon decided. Lung Ruoxua helplessly nodded. At this moment, the demon touched Lung Ruoxia's stomach and asked, Wifey, will you not love me as much as you used to after we give birth? Of course I won't. Lung Ruoxua promised. But Song said that after giving birth, your mind won't be on me. If such a thing really happens, I don't mind sending my child away. The demon said with a hint of worry. That kind of thing will never happen. In my heart, you will always be the most important. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxua immediately said, but in her heart, she was so angry at Song's words that she gritted her teeth. She had thought that the two of them had temporarily stopped fighting. So they had gone underground? The more Lung Ruoxua thought about it, the angrier she got. However, she didn't show it on her face. She continued coaxing the evildoer for a while more before she finally managed to coax this insecure fellow into bursting with joy. After that, Lung Ruoxua found Song and instructed him to bring grandfather and the rest to planet Indigo. Just like that, Azure, who didn't know the truth, was sent out. On the other side, the demon was ready to officially study medicine. Since he wanted to study medicine, he had to find a school. For this reason, the evildoer gave the task of finding a school to Ji Kai. Ji Kai didn't know what to do when he received this annoying task. After all, it was really not easy for a stowaway without any identification to go to school. Ji Kai had been struggling for a few days and inadvertently revealed his thoughts to Qingju. When Qingju heard this, he smiled and said, It's easy to get identification. Just find them. The that green vessel was referring to were the two mainframe of the starfields that were not far away, doing nothing. Ever since these two little guys were brought back by Blue, they had been following them. Blue had even changed their bodies to become two palm-sized rabbits. One was gray, the other black. The two rabbit-shaped mainframe were having a hard time with their new bodies. As the mainframe, the two of them naturally had high IQs, so they were quite clear that rabbits were mostly carnivorous. However, in Song's words, they were mini pet rabbits. If they took it out, they would definitely be able to charm a large number of girls. With the intention of charming a large number of girls, the two of them put up with their new image. However, ever since they had their new bodies, The two rabbits had not seen many pretty girls. The only one they had seen was Lung Ruoxua, who was not to be trifled with. Towards pretty girls, they did not dare to have any thoughts about her. Chapter 3041. The Demon's Decision 3. In this way, the two rabbits were so idle that they were about to grow green fur. The two rabbits with sharp ears immediately perked up their little ears to listen carefully when they heard that there was a job. Jikai still didn't know the identity of these two rabbits. However, he wasn't too surprised by their sudden appearance, because they were brought back by the little white cat. But now that Qingju reminded him to ask for help from these two rabbits, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at the rabbits that were already quite fat. Oh, it could be used as a dish. Jikai was already very picky about the dishes that went with wine, but these two rabbits were barely qualified. It should be good to nourish Madame's body. Just as Jikai's thoughts were running wild, Qingju's small meaty claw hit Jikai's head and he shouted, "You bastard! They are not for you to eat. Don't you need proof of identity? Just find the two of them." They're two rabbits." Jikai couldn't help but whisper. "He is on the outside, but not on the inside. Besides, even if they're just two pet rabbits now, they're still more useful than you," Qingju said with a look of disdain. These words hurt Jikai's fragile heart. Could it be that he was not even as good as two rabbits? Idiot. After cursing, it closed its mouth again and put on a noble and cold appearance. Jikai was frightened by the rabbit that suddenly spoke. Why, was it another talking beastie? How could this be? No wonder he was always looked down upon. It seemed that he was really worse than two rabbits. Jikai was very sad. Qingju couldn't stand it anymore and finally said something fair. "You don't have to be too sad. These two rabbits are the mainframe. You naturally can't compare to them in certain aspects." The ability he was referring to was naturally hacking into Planet Indigo's network. In reality, without Lung Ruoxua and the rest knowing, the two bored rabbits had already done that. However, they were afraid of being scolded, so they didn't dare to report this. "MA mainframe?" Jikai was stunned. Did he mean what he was thinking? Yes. Green Vessel nodded and explained. "One of them was brought here by Tsong and I from the vast galaxy. The other one is the mainframe of the Parliament Alliance." Jikai was silent. All right. After the three of them, the little boy and the little white cat had added another layer of frost to the Haoyuan star field, and the Congress Alliance. Jikai observed 3 minutes of silence for the Congress Alliance before nodding. If it's them, then there shouldn't be a problem with our identification. The mainframe. His original job was to monitor the network, which was even more powerful than the so-called hackers. How could Jikai not be at ease? A day later, the two rabbits who had received the mission had confirmed the identities of Lung Ruoxua and the others. From kindergarten all the way to high school, their ages had also been changed. Lung Ruoxua and the demon were both 20 years old, while Jikai was a 35-year-old uncle. For men, 35 years old was the golden age of men, so Jikai was very proud. Things would be much easier with an identity. Jikai went out to run to school. "Thanks, how is it? Did you find the school?" the demon asked. No, medical schools have very strict requirements for their students' qualifications. Many schools refuse to accept their owners when they hear that they haven't passed the college entrance examination. Jikai said honestly. "College entrance exam? What's that?" The evildoer who had never gone to school expressed that he didn't understand. "College entrance exam. It's a way for ordinary people to study. After passing the college entrance examination and being admitted to a university, they can then study the university's courses." Lung Ruoxua explained with a smile. "Is there any university that I can go to without the college entrance examination?" The demon asked gloomily. "What college entrance exam? It sounded so difficult." "There are, but you won't be able to learn anything useful in that kind of university. So if you want to study medicine well, my dear husband, you still have to take the college entrance examination." Lung Ruoxua laughed evilly. To be honest, she didn't want the evildoer to study medicine so hard. After all, they were gods, and giving birth was definitely different from ordinary people. However, this was the evildoer's kind intention, and she couldn't reject it. Thus, she could only hope that the evildoer would take the initiative to give up. But the little devil's temper came up. "I want to take the college entrance exam." "The demons will," said firmly. "Then participate." Lung Ruoxue was at her wit's end. After deciding to take the college entrance examination, the first thing the demon had to do was to learn about the knowledge of planet Indigo. Even though Lung Ruoxue had taken the college entrance exam in her previous life, she was not very familiar with planet Indigo's knowledge. As such, she had no way of helping the demon. After some thought, she ordered Ji Kai to hire a tutor for the evildoer. Ji Kai quickly settled this matter. The tutor he hired was a young man in his early 20s. The moment he saw Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer, the young man was in a daze for a long time. When he regained his senses, his little face was still red and he did not know where to put his hands and feet. The young man, who originally wanted to work while studying, didn't expect his client to be so beautiful. Wasn't this a scam? Facing such a monstrous student, who could still concentrate on teaching. The young man was very worried. The salary of this job was very high, and he didn't want to lose it because of his distraction. After a long period of silence, the young man decided to start the class. When he saw Lung Ruoxue take out a set of elementary school textbooks, the young man was in a mess. What was the meaning of this? The young man didn't understand. "Let's start from elementary school," Lung Ruoxue explained with a faint smile. "Okay." The young man was depressed for a moment, but he agreed. He completely treated this as a test from the host. The young man was also very serious when he taught. Basically, he only had to teach them once before Lung Ruoxue, and the demon who were learning with him understood. In reality, Lung Ruoxue was the only one who truly understood. As for the demon, he had completely imprinted the contents of the books into his mind. When he needed them, he would flip through them and use them. When he didn't need them, he would just store them in the depths of his mind. It had to be said that his learning method was quite suitable for this kind of intensive learning. The reason why Lung Ruoxue followed him was because she was afraid that the demon would not understand something, and she could be of help when the time came. But now that the demon had taken a shortcut, she naturally didn't need to study seriously anymore. However, she still chose to listen. A month later, the evildoer and Lung Ruoxue had completed all the courses from elementary school to high school. The young man was quite surprised at the learning speed of this pair of monsters. They were real geniuses. In comparison, those self-proclaimed geniuses in their school were nothing. Knowing that the evildoer was going to take the college entrance examination and study medicine, the young man strongly recommended the evildoer to apply for their school and make it clear that they were the top school on planet Indigo, with the best campus environment and teachers. Chapter 3042. The Demon's Decision 4. After hearing this, the demon was a little tempted. However, he didn't immediately agree. He only said, "I need to discuss this with my wife." Hearing the demon's words, the young man's mouth couldn't help but twitch. It was hard for him to imagine that the beautiful man and woman in front of him, who were not even 20 years old, were already husband and wife. The man still kept talking about his wife all day long, as if he was afraid that others would not know that he was afraid of his wife. Although he had heard it a lot and should have calmed down, every time he heard the demonic man talk about his wife, he felt very conflicted. Men. He was tied up tightly just like that. The point was that the person in jail didn't struggle at all, and even enjoyed being tied up by a woman. The young man had no experience in love, so he naturally could not understand the mood of a demon who respected his wife. However, this matter was obviously not something that he could ask about as a tutor, so he quickly felt at ease. A few months before the college entrance exam, Ji Kai had to help his master register. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue ordered Ji Kai to register her as well. She was also taking the college entrance examination. When Ji Kai heard this, he was stunned for a long time. "Madam, although your stomach isn't obvious yet, you'll be old and in labor by the time you take the college entrance examination. How can you take the college entrance examination in that state?" Ji Kai didn't dare to imagine how lively it would be if the child was born on the exam grounds. Knowing what Ji Kai was thinking, Lung Ruoxue told him the truth. "Don't worry, I can't give birth so quickly." What did he mean by can't give birth so soon? Could he endure through the college entrance examination or? When he thought of this, Jikai suddenly woke up. That's not right. If Master wanted to study medicine, he had to take the college entrance examination first. But after the college entrance examination, he would have a holiday and school would start again. This would take several months. If that was the case, it would definitely be too late for Master to learn medicine and help Madam deliver a baby. It should be known that a woman would be pregnant for 10 months, and Madam was now 6 months old. She would probably give birth before the day of the college entrance examination. And by then, Master's school had not started yet. Thinking about this, Jikai suddenly didn't know what the meaning of his master's hard work in college entrance exams was. I told you I can't give birth so quickly. Lung Ruoxue repeated before Jikai could voice his thoughts. Yeah, my child won't be out so soon. The demon also nodded. Jikai didn't understand, but since his master and his wife said so, what else could he say? He could only follow Madam's instructions. Not long after reporting to his master and Madam, Song brought Lung Qingtian and the others to planet Netherblue. Seeing Lung Ruoxue, who they had not seen for a long time, everyone naturally exchanged some pleasantries. When Lung Qingtian and Lung Ruhan found out that one of them was going to be a great-grandfather and the other was going to be an uncle, they were overjoyed. Ever since they had arrived on the Netherblue planet, Lung Ruoxue had many protectors by her side, causing the demon to find it extremely difficult to even take a single step closer to Shui. In the words of Lung Qingtian and the others, Shui was pregnant now, so she had to be careful in everything. Of course, the person she had to be especially careful of was naturally a demon. The reason why they treated evildoer this way, other than punishing him for kidnapping Shui and leaving without saying goodbye, was also because Tsang had snitched on him. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard this, they were shocked. From then on, the days of suffering for the evildoers officially began. He wanted to hug his wife, but it was harder than ascending to the heavens to get close to her. This also caused him to hang his head all day long. His face was frighteningly dark, and cold currents were flowing around him. For a moment, the air pressure in the entire villa was comparable to that of the South Pole. Thanks as the head butler, Jikai sympathized with his poor master. But he didn't expect Madam's maiden family to be so fierce. Even the master couldn't do anything about it, so he, a little servant, naturally didn't dare to be rash. As such, Jikai could only support and sympathize with his master in his heart. As for Lung Ruoxue, after being protected by her grandfather and the others, she could only feel helpless. In fact, she wasn't that fragile, okay? Of course, her heart ached even more for the evildoer who looked at her with resentful eyes every day. After a long conversation with his grandfather and the others, Lung Qingtian and the others finally gave in and sighed. A grown girl can't be kept in the family. This is just how far. She felt heartache for her man. Lung Qingtian and the others felt sour in their hearts, but they still allowed the evildoer to get close to Shui. Of course, they also gave him a warning. The demon naturally agreed, and then hugged his wife tightly like a pitiful homeless child, expressing his feelings. Lung Ruoxue comforted him and finally managed to coax the evildoer into a smile. Ever since her grandfather and the others arrived, the house had suddenly become lively. Back then, when Jikai saw so many people and beasts, he was not used to it. In particular, there were many precious animals among the beasts, and all of them could speak the human language. This simply made his eyes unable to take enough of them. However, the spirit beasts did not have a good attitude towards Jikai, because in their hearts, Jikai was a damned evildoer, and this damned evildoer had once abducted their master. So he was their enemy. The servants of their enemies were naturally their enemies. With this reasoning, it would not be so easy for Jikai to please them. However, those beasts were all the size of a palm, and many of them were fluffy. They looked too cute, so Jikai couldn't help but stick his warm face to their cold butts. After a long time, he really made some progress. At the very least, the spirit beasts no longer rejected Jikai as much as they had before. Just like that, Jikai spent his days cooking. After cooking more, Jikai's cooking skills had improved by leaps and bounds, and his relationship with the beasts had also improved rapidly while feeding them. It couldn't be helped, as Ji Kai was now their nanny. Time passed quickly. Soon the day of the college entrance examination arrived. To Ji Kai's dismay, his wife's stomach was still normal even after a few months. Ji Kai was deeply worried about this fact. Was Madame pregnant or not? Ji Kai didn't dare to ask. Whenever he had the chance, he would glance at his wife's stomach and then quickly look away to avoid being discovered. In fact, how could his little trick escape the eyes of all the people and beasts? However, none of them exposed Ji Kai. After sending Leng Ruoxue and the evildoer into the exam hall, Bai Su and Feng Zhan took the initiative to chat with Ji Kai to distract him from his anxiety. While they were chatting, Ji Kai unintentionally revealed his worries, instantly causing Feng Zhan and Bai Su to laugh out loud. After laughing enough, Feng Zhan answered, "You're thinking too much. Master definitely has a baby. It's just that our god's baby won't be born so soon. Like me, I stayed in the egg for at least 1,000 years before I came out. This stinky cat is the same." Chapter 30-43. The Demon's Decision 5, Ugh. Looking at the fiery red macaw that Feng Zhan had transformed into and the stinky cat that he was talking about, Ji Kai was a little confused. 1,000 years? If that was the case, would he still have a chance to see Little Master? I'm afraid he can't even live for 1,000 years? Ji Kai was very sad. After all, he had been looking forward to seeing his Little Master. No matter what, he had to see her. Otherwise he would not be able to die in peace. Calm down. Master's baby shouldn't take that long. It will definitely be born within 100 years. Sensing Ji Kai's low mood, Feng Zhan consoled him with a smile. Hearing this, Ji Kai couldn't help but glance at Feng Zhan. He thought to himself, "Is this a consolation? 100 years isn't a short time, is it? Of course, it was much shorter than 1,000 years. I hope he has the chance to see Little Master come into being." After understanding that his future Little Master was different from the rest, Ji Kai forced himself to calm down. He was not prepared to stare at Leng Ruoxue's stomach and sigh anymore. After 3 days of examinations, Leng Ruoxue and the demon acted as if nothing had happened. They did not care about the results at all. However, Leng Qingtian and the others, who had no idea what the college entrance examination was, were rather interested in the college entrance examination that Leng Ruoxue and the demon were participating in. After some understanding, everyone immediately made the decision to take the college entrance examination. Of course, they could only participate in next year's. The 2-rabbit mainframe helped everyone to get their identification. Ji Kai then invited the young man from before. These people in front of him, any one of them could be a male god-level school hunk. Was it really good for such a group of people to enter university? The young man could already foresee the reaction of the group of infatuated girls on campus when they saw this fat meat. After giving everyone a sympathetic look, the young man began to teach seriously without batting an eyelid. Although they were baffled by the young man's gaze, no one thought too much about it. They took a shortcut in their studies like a demon. In less than a month, the young man lost his job again. However, to the young man he was quite proud, because the results of the college entrance examination were already out. He had taught a top scorer in second place. Needless to say, the college entrance examination's top scorer was naturally Leng Ruoxue, while Demon's results placed him in second place among all the college entrance examination candidates on planet Indigo. As expected, the two of them became the young man's schoolmates. When it came to choosing her major, Leng Ruoxue had initially wanted to choose the law. However, under the gaze of those devilish black eyes, she had chosen the medicine as well. Leng Ruoxue could only comfort herself that she had only learned medicine because she was afraid that someone would take advantage of her absence to seduce her man. The demon didn't care why his wife studied medicine. He was very happy to be able to go in and out with his wife every day. He didn't have to worry about people who were blind to provoke his wife. Their university was called Netherblue University. It was the best university on planet Netherblue, and the students who graduated would be elites in their respective fields. Of course, there were many children of aristocratic families among the students, and these children were not idiots. They all got in with their own results. Entering a university like this meant that everyone had to study hard. However, Lung Ruoxue was definitely not on the list of people who would study hard. Thanks on the first day of school, the two of them went to report together. Before they even entered the school, their extraordinary looks caused a huge commotion. Fortunately, they had the help of their former tutor, this old bird. That was why Lung Ruoxue and the demon did not get drowned in the crowd. Under the cover of the young man, Lung Ruoxue and the demon finally arrived at the medical school. Every year, the School of Medicine's marks were the highest in Netherblue University. Even though there were many students who applied, the School of Medicine's marks were always extremely high every time they recruited new students. This year, the marks were simply heaven-defying, so the only new students in the School of Medicine this year were Lung Ruoxue and Demon. Of course, Lung Ruoxue was still unaware of this situation. The senior who had accepted the mission to welcome them outside the medical school had not told them about this either. Once she entered the medical school campus, Lung Ruoxue could smell the strong smell of disinfectant. It was similar to the smell in the hospital. At this moment, she regretted studying medicine. She didn't like the smell. However, Lung Ruoxue also knew that retreating now would not work. She still had to accompany the evildoer. After finishing the admission procedures, the two of them went home. 3 days later, classes officially began. When Lung Ruoxue and the demon arrived at the classroom according to the timetable given to them, they saw that the huge classroom was empty. There was not a single student in sight. They immediately realized that they had arrived early. It wasn't until an old professor in his 70s arrived that Lung Ruoxue realized that something was amiss. It was only the two of them. Seeing that the old professor was about to start his class, she couldn't help but ask, "Professor, I don't think all the students have arrived yet." "Who said that not everyone is here? You two are the only students in this batch," the old professor said affably. This year's top and second place were both his students, so he was in a very good mood. But when Lung Ruoxue heard this terrifying news, she was in a bad mood. According to her thoughts, if there were more students she could slack off, but now there were only two of them. She was afraid that even if she took a nap in class, the professor would find out. This feeling was really too sad. As if he could see through Lung Ruoxue's thoughts of slacking off, the old professor, whose beard had turned a little white, smiled even more warmly. "Our medical department's teaching style is a little different from other departments. It's more dependent on students' self-exploration and internship. So if you can fully understand what's in the books, I don't care what you do in my class. However, if you can't answer a question of mine, then you'll have to face my monstrous anger. Tremble. The children," the old professor suddenly said in an impassioned tone. At this moment, Lung Ruoxue was even more suspicious of her choice. Unfortunately, in the old professor's eyes, the 2 pieces of fat meat in front of him had already boarded the pirate ship, and it was too late for him to regret. The old professor was pleased with himself and started his lecture. After listening for a while, the demon said impatiently, "Professor, can we not talk about this? I'm not interested in these things." The old professor's first lesson was about basic medical knowledge. For a demon who only wanted to help his wife deliver, it was completely useless, so he didn't have the patience to continue listening. When the old professor heard the demon's words, he immediately blew his beard and glared. "Then what are you interested in?" Of course, he was just asking casually. "I want to learn how to give birth," the demon shouted. Chapter 3044. The Demon's Decision 6. The old professor's interest was piqued, and he continued to ask, "Tell me, why do you want to study gynecology?" "I'm going to help my wife deliver a baby," the demon said confidently, while Lung Ruoxue wanted to cover her face. He had to learn gynecology to help his wife deliver? What about the others? You're not going to care? The old professor was dumbfounded. He didn't understand it wrong, did he? "I just want to help my wife deliver the baby. It's none of my business," the demon said calmly. When the old professor heard this, he almost lost his breath and called the ambulance. He opened his mouth and only blurted out after a long while, "Do you know the purpose of learning medicine?" "I don't know, and I don't want to know. I studied medicine to help my wife deliver a baby." The demon was very honest. "You A doctor has the heart of a parent. The purpose of studying medicine is to save the dying and heal the injured. How can you only care about your wife and not others? The old professor panted a few times before he could finish his sentence. There are so many doctors, it's not like I'm the only one, the demon said indifferently. But I'm the only husband my wife has, so I have to take care of her. Otherwise she'll be so pitiful. It's not like I don't want you to take care of your wife. I mean, you can't be so selfish. Being a doctor is such a sacred profession. If you only help your wife deliver after learning it, won't you lose your medical skills? The old professor tried his best to persuade him, hoping that the demon would understand the duty of a doctor. However, the demon was a one-track mind. He insisted on only caring about his wife and not about anyone else. The old professor was so angry that he wanted to throw the blackboard eraser away. On the other hand, Lung Ruoxue felt rather consoled after hearing the demon's words. After all, they were not the saviors of the world. Moreover, cultivators had long seen through life and death, so they were cold to ordinary people who knew the cycle of life and death. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand why the old professor's words could not move them. However, the old professor was not willing to give up, and had his eyes on Lung Ruoxue. He knew that the beautiful young woman in front of him was this brat's wife. This was no secret in the medical school. However, before the old professor could speak, Lung Ruoxue spoke first. Don't try to persuade me, I'm not here to save the world. Then what are you doing here? The old professor was already gritting his teeth. These two kids were the only two students in their medical school this year. Were they all here to anger him? I'm here to accompany my husband. Lung Ruoxue replied matter-of-factly. The old professor couldn't keep his calm anymore. Of the only two students this year, one was here to accompany her husband, and the other only wanted to study gynecology and obstetrics to help her deliver her wife. Neither of them really wanted to study medicine. What was going on? If word of this got out, wouldn't the other old guys he knew laugh their heads off? Thanks, a heavy atmosphere filled the spacious classroom. Lung Ruoxue was starting to feel sorry for the old professor. As far as she knew, this professor was a leading figure in the medical world, and had students all over the world. But now, he was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. This was really a sin. After some thought, Lung Ruoxue didn't want to agitate the old professor too much, so she said in a gentler tone, "Professor, you don't have to worry too much. We'll learn what we need to learn, and we'll get full marks for the exams. I just hope that you won't be too strict with us. Of course, when you want to show off to your old friends, you can still drag us out. We definitely won't embarrass you. That should be fine, right?" Lung Ruoxue knew that elders of this age liked to compare. They would compete with their sons, grandsons, and students. In short, they would not let go of anything that they could compete with. Moreover, the person in front of her was an old man. So in order to be more at ease when studying, she was willing to give him some benefits. Clearly, Lung Ruoxue's words had hit the other party's soft spot. The old professor was still a professor in a medical school at this age. Wasn't he looking for a true successor? He would show it off when he needed it. He had thought that there would be two good seedlings, but who knew that neither of these two little fellows in front of him wanted to really study medicine. However, the old professor didn't want to make things difficult for him, so he only thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. In fact, he had no choice but to agree. Although the two little guys in front of him were young, they were not easy to kidnap. Therefore, the smart old professor could only take a step back and settle for second best. The old professor couldn't teach him immediately after knowing that the demon only wanted to study gynecology. After all, the basic knowledge of medicine still had to be learned. He couldn't just run away without even knowing how to walk, right? After explaining the logic to the genius expressed his understanding and asked to study at home. The old professor would directly teach him about gynecology in the next class. The old professor felt his balls ache when he understood the demon's meaning. He had heard of self-study in other departments, but he had never heard of it in the medical department. Could it be that their medical department was going to produce a self-taught talent this year? When he thought of Lung Ruoxue and evildoers' results, the old professor couldn't stay calm anymore. What a waste! How did he let these two become this year's top and second place? This caused him to look down on the other students. Now this was great. A single misstep would cause eternal hatred. The old professor deeply felt that he had fallen into the trap set up by this couple, and that he would never be able to climb out of it. However, he still kindly passed the thick stack of books to the demon and Lung Ruoxue and reminded them, "Go back and study yourself. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me anytime. I'll test you guys in the next class." After saying that, the old professor left with a hunched back and a heavy heart. When they reached home, Lung Ruoxue and the demon quickly flipped through the book that the old professor had given them. With their photographic memory, it did not take long for them to memorize the contents of the book, without missing a single word. When it was time for class again, the old professor was hit hard again. The reason was naturally that he, as a leading figure in the medical world, could not stop the two little fellows. This made him feel very disappointed. However, he also saw two real self-taught medical geniuses, and he felt that with their current level, they could go to the hospital to be interns. Lung Ruoxue and the demon already had a solid foundation in their theoretical knowledge. The only thing they were lacking was a base. Of course, Genius didn't learn gynecology, which he wanted to learn the most. It wasn't that he didn't want to learn by himself, but the books the old professor gave him didn't have anything related to that. Now the old professor was in a difficult position. Should he teach them himself, or let the two little guys learn by themselves? It must be known that teaching these two students would be a heavy blow to any professor. Chapter 30-45. The Demon's Decision 7. It wasn't good for the students to be too smart. The professors wouldn't feel a sense of accomplishment. The poor old professor was having the same feeling now. After pondering for a long time, the old professor made up his mind, and let Lung Ruoxue and the demon go home to self-study. He also instructed them to ask at any time if they had any questions. When she returned home, Lung Ruoxue stared at the thick stack of books in a daze. "Swear, what's wrong?" the demon asked in confusion. "I feel like we've gone to university for nothing. We've studied on our own." Lung Ruoxue said gloomily, "It's okay. It's just getting into university. It's not troublesome for us." The demon didn't think so. He felt that as long as he could learn what he needed, it would be fine. Who cared if it was self-study or not? And he was currently quite satisfied with this learning method. In the blink of an eye, 2 years of university life passed. The number of times Lung Ruoxue and the demon came to the school could be counted with one's fingers. However, the two of them kept in contact with that depressed old professor. The old professor loved and hated these two students at the same time, and his feelings were extremely complicated. A year ago, Lung Qingtian and the others had also passed the college entrance examination and became students of Netherblue University. Although Lung Qingtian and the others had applied for different specializations, they all had one thing in common, and that was that they did not like to attend classes every day and preferred to self-study. Their actions made the professors in Netherblue University even more depressed. However, the professors couldn't do anything about it. After all, their results were there. Even if they were self-taught, they often took the top 3 in each major during the exam, which made the professors love and hate them. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest enjoyed such a life. In their eyes, a colorful campus could adjust their lives. Of course, if there weren't so many love-struck girls on campus, their little days would be even happier. Lung Qingtian and the others found joy in this, but Ji Kai and the beasts couldn't. Originally, Ji Kai also wanted to get into a university for fun, but he had failed the college entrance exam twice in a row. This fact made him quite depressed. But luckily, the family members didn't have to go to school every day. This made the beasties feel a little more at ease. Just as Lung Ruoxue and the rest were enjoying their peaceful days, she suddenly received a red bomb. A wedding invitation. The owner of the wedding invitation was Chu Sun, who had appeared briefly 2 years ago. Looking at the red bomb in her hand, Lung Ruoxue could not understand. Hadn't the matter already been settled? Why did Chu Sun send her a wedding invitation? Could it be that he wanted to show off? Lung Ruoxue deeply felt that this was a possibility. Otherwise, There was no other way to explain the original intention of the other party sending her the wedding invitation. Just as Lung Ruoxue was hesitating on how to deal with this red bomb, Lung Qingtian and the others, who had already learned the truth from Qingju, decided unanimously that they would participate. This was also to clear Shui Er's name. Seeing that her grandfather and the rest were in high spirits, Lung Ruoxue could only go along with their wishes. On the day of the wedding, Lung Ruoxue was dressed in a red gown, which made her look even more beautiful and moving. The demon and the rest were all dressed in suits and leather shoes, looking extremely handsome. The beasties who were also attending the wedding had all combed their fur and feathers. Every little beastie's fur was smooth and shiny, and they were extremely cute. Thanks. Why did they look like they were there to cause a scene? She believed that with these beautiful men around her, the groom would probably become a shadow of a man. Of course, at this moment, Lung Ruoxue had completely forgotten about her existence. And with their departure, not only would the groom become a decoration, even the bride would become invisible. As there were many people, Lung Ruoxue had specially instructed Ji Kai to rent 2 large buses that could carry 100 people. At first, Ji Kai didn't feel much about renting a big guest to attend the wedding. After all, they had more people, and the big guest was the cheapest. However, when Ji Kai saw the bus driver's conflicted expression, he realized that something was wrong. Wearing a suit and being a guest? Only people like them could think of such a thing, right? However, seeing that everyone was extremely calm, Ji Kai also calmed down. In any case, if it was really embarrassing, he would not be lonely. The bus driver, who was in a dilemma, drove the bus away with an unknown feeling. Chu Sen's wedding was arranged to be held at the Chu family's ancestral home. It was a place where the most powerful families on the planet gathered. When the 2 ordinary buses drove into this high-end, magnificent, and top-grade residential area, the dignitaries living there and the guests who came to attend the wedding were instantly horrified. Where did this guest come from? Why would a Volkswagen bus appear in this place? In fact, not only were the noble families unable to accept what they were seeing, even the bus driver almost couldn't bear it. The strange gazes from outside the car were like 2 sharp knives that pierced straight into the heart of the driver. This really wasn't a place they should be. The driver felt his face burning. Sensing the driver's uneasiness, Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and said, "Calm down. You guys aren't any worse than anyone else." Lung Ruoxue's words miraculously appeased the bus driver, who was a little anxious. After the bus driver had calmed down, he drove the bus into the temporary parking lot of the wedding banquet. The bus was surrounded by expensive and limited edition sports cars and caverns. The bus driver suddenly felt proud to be in the middle of those high-end cars. After all, not everyone had such an experience. The 2 buses were parked side by side. When the guests who had just arrived saw the bus stop in their dedicated parking lot, they immediately lost their calm. Very quickly, a staff member stepped forward to question the bus driver and arrogantly told him, "This is not a place for you to park." The chauffeur blinked his eyes innocently before turning to look at Lung Ruoxue. Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and took out an admonishment card from her red pouch for the staff to take a look. Seeing the remonstration request, it was the staff member's turn to lose his calm. She had thought that these people had stopped at the wrong place. Who would have thought that they were really here to attend the wedding? The staff could not understand how a top family like the Chu family could have such a poor relative. The staff member, who was a little confused, had nothing to say after confirming the authenticity of the remonstration. Seeing him like this, the bus driver suddenly became more arrogant. Lung Ruoxue, who was sitting behind the driver, could not help but laugh to herself when she saw the driver's smug look. One should know that even if she were to dress up beautifully to ride on such a vehicle, she would not find it embarrassing at all. What was the big deal? This is called being unique, okay? Chapter 3046. The Demon's Decision. 8. When the door of the bus opened, Lung Ruoxue and the rest alighted elegantly. The indignant onlookers were once again dumbfounded. However, what made them even more dumbfounded was that one of the middle-aged men in a suit and leather shoes was actually holding a sack in his hand. It was bulging, and they had no idea what was inside. This image of the other party had once again refreshed their understanding of Lung Ruoxue and the rest. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were extremely calm, as if the matter had nothing to do with them. When the staff member heard this, he instantly felt wronged. He hadn't even said anything, okay? However, Lung Ruoxue did not look at people's expressions when she was looking at them. Moreover, Green Vessel and Green Jade had already translated the thoughts of the staff members for her, so it was impossible for her not to know. All right, bring us to the wedding banquet. Lung Ruoxue didn't even give the staff a chance to speak and immediately gave her instructions. The staff member was helpless, but he could not just leave this group of people behind. Hence, he could only brace himself and lead the way for Lung Ruoxue and the others. When they arrived at the main entrance of the Chu family's ancestral residence, the person in charge of a 4S shop was standing at the door to welcome them. The moment he saw Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer, the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't understand why the two of them were here on the vice president's big day. He even brought a large group of people. What was he trying to do? Smash the place? The person in charge had already started imagining things. He would never have thought that Chu-sun would actually send a remonstration request to Lung Ruoxue, and she would come to the banquet. The person in charge, who was in a dilemma, saw that Lung Ruoxue and the others were approaching and quickly went up to them. These two were not to be trifled with. Please don't cause any trouble on this joyous day. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the person in charge, who seemed to be on edge. She smiled charmingly and comforted him. Chu-sun invited us to his wedding. Don't be afraid. We're not here to mess things up. We're not here to ask you to fix your car. Poochie. Hearing this, Ji-kai couldn't help but laugh, while the person in charge's face turned red. Looking at the person in charge's constipated expression, Ji-kai comforted him kindly. Yes, don't be afraid. I've stopped getting into a car accident a long time ago. The person in charge didn't know what to say. He only felt that there were thousands of horses running wildly in his heart. Was this the main point? Was this the main point? Kiss. The person in charge was deeply regretful. Why did he take on the job of welcoming guests? He even met Lung Ruoxue and the others. Looking at the huge lineup of the other party, the person in charge changed the topic and asked, I wonder who they are? My family. Lung Ruoxue explained simply. Miss Lung has so many family members. The person in charge was speechless. Each of them was carrying a small animal. Was this the rhythm of a zoo? It's all right, this isn't all. Lung Ruoxue smiled indifferently. Instantly, the person in charge's polite words were stuck in his throat. After taking a few deep breaths, the person in charge continued. Please come in, Miss Lung and the others. Thanks. As he watched Lung Ruoxue and the others leave, he looked at the things in his hands and felt an indescribable pain in his balls. This gunny sack really didn't fit in with such an occasion. It was a pity that Lung Ruoxue and the rest did not care about that. After entering the Chu clan's residence and taking a casual look around, everyone lost interest in the Chu clan's ancestral residence. To be honest, in the human world, such a residence was indeed very attractive. However, Lung Ruoxue and the others were gods. What had he not seen? Therefore, to them, the Chu family was no different from an ordinary house. As such, they naturally did not dare to be interested. They found a corner and sat down, waiting for the wedding to begin. However, no matter how low profile they were, such a large group of handsome men and beautiful women was enough to dazzle the eyes of others. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had long gotten used to such worshipful gazes. Hence, they were rather calm. Meow meow. At this moment, the meowing of a cat entered the ears of Lung Ruoxue and the others. Lung Ruoxue could clearly feel a ball of fur by her feet. She lowered her head and saw a little female cat with a golden body snuggling up by her feet. Her light golden eyes were wide open as she looked at her with joy. Ahua! Lung Ruoxue said softly as she looked at Song, who was in her arms with a dark expression. Meow meow. Ahua was very happy that this beautiful sister still recognized it. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard Ahua's domineering name, they couldn't help but carefully size it up. Ahua was said to be Senior Song's pursuer, but unfortunately, it was taken away by its owner. Therefore, the two cats were not fated to meet, and looking at Senior Song's expression, it was obvious that he didn't want to have anything to do with the other party. Just as everyone was fantasizing, 2 meowing sounds were heard. Following that, Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw a black cat that was about the same size as Ahua appear in their line of sight. The moment the black cat saw Lung Ruoxue, it bared its teeth in an extremely unfriendly manner. Lung Ruoxue did not understand. She had not offended this cat. At this time, Ahua meowed at the black cat, and the black cat retracted its sharp teeth, but the expression on the cat's face was still quite unhappy. "Sister, this little guy isn't being mean to you," Green Vessel explained with a smirk. "What?" Lung Ruoxue did not understand. Everyone looked at Qingju curiously. "This black cat is Ahua's mate," Qingju explained with a smile. "I see. Now what else did everyone not understand?" At the same time they all looked at Azure. Azure was so angry that all the fur on his body stood up. However, before he could get angry, he heard the black cat meow at him in warning. "Stay away from my woman. Your sister. I'm not interested in your woman." The Azure beast roared twice to show that it was very unhappy. How detestable. If it wasn't for Nyo's rule that they couldn't speak human language in public, it would definitely teach this black cat a good lesson. Beast language. This was too painful. Chapter 3047. Graduation Internship 1. Then stay far away from my woman, the black cat shouted. Song calmly looked at Ahua, and then at his own Nyo. He was a little speechless. "I'm not close to your woman." At least at a safe distance, Ahua definitely wouldn't be able to pounce on him. So Tsong really felt that his innocence was still guaranteed. Unfortunately, the black cat didn't think so. It meowed angrily. "You shouldn't have appeared in the first place." When Azure heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You think I want to appear? It's all because your Ahua's master sent an invitation to my Nyo. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother to come." After saying that, Song Huan arrogantly raised his fluffy little head, putting on a noble and cold expression. With Green Vessel's real-time translation, everyone could understand the interaction between Song and the black cat. However, this fact made everyone sigh. It seemed that no matter where and when, there would always be people who were jealous of each other. While watching the show, the crowd also expressed deep sympathy for the black cat on the Tsang bar. Then they looked at Ahua at the same time. They were very curious about how the little female cat would react in the face of the new and old love. Seeing that the black cat was so angry that it couldn't speak and its small body was panting, Ahua went forward and gently rubbed the black cat's small body and comforted it by meowing. "Ah hey, that's all in the past. Why are you still so calculative?" Hearing this, the black cat couldn't help but widen its round eyes. It wanted to roar at Ahua but couldn't bear to, so it could only look at Song sullenly. In the face of the black cat's sudden grievance, Song's forehead couldn't help but be filled with black lines and secretly complained. Was this pretending to be pitiful? However, it was happy to see that Ahua was taken. After thinking about it, Song comforted. "Ah hey, right? Don't worry, I'm not interested in your Ahua. I'm here to attend the wedding with Nyo, so you don't have to treat me as an enemy really." It was rare for Azure to be kind, but whether or not the other party would listen to him was none of his business. The black cat listened to Song's words and stared at Song for a long time. Finally, it meowed to Ahua. "Ahua, follow me." Although Ahua was reluctant to leave, it still gave the black cat face and walked away with elegant cat steps, looking back 3 times with each step. Looking at Ahua's reluctant eyes, Lung Qingtian and the others didn't know what to say. It was just an ordinary kitten, yet it had such rich feelings. Obviously, Song had already become a cinnabar in Ahua's heart. After this small interlude, Lung Ruoxue and the others fell silent for a moment. But luckily, the wedding was about to begin. The guests at Chu Sen's wedding were either rich or powerful. In order to match the Chu family's status, his wedding was naturally quite luxurious. As the wedding approached, the guests were invited into the Chu family's luxurious banquet hall. After Lung Ruoxue and the rest entered, they were led by the waiter to their seats. However, due to the large number of people, one table could not fit them at all. Therefore, under the dumbfounded gazes of the other guests, they filled a total of 10 tables. It was quite eye-catching for so many people to come from a family, And normally speaking, no family could bring so many people at once, even bringing at least one beast with them. The guests who felt that there was chaos in the luxurious banquet hall were quite annoyed, but since they were guests invited by the Chu family, they could not say anything no matter how dissatisfied they were. However, they secretly gave the Chu family's poor relatives the middle finger, and were also dissatisfied with the Chu family. Thanks in reality, Chu's son did not know why he would invite Lung Ruoxue and the rest to attend the wedding. However, he did. More importantly, he did not expect Lung Ruoxue to be willing to come. She even brought so many family members and beastie along. Even though Madame Chu was satisfied with Lung Ruoxue, she could not bring herself to be happy when she thought of her younger sister. It wasn't easy for his son to get rid of that person's shadow, and was willing to find a woman to marry. But now, the wedding had provoked those people again. It was best if nothing happened to the wedding. Initially, Madame Chu did not agree to invite Lung Ruoxue and the others. However, her son insisted on inviting them. Under the circumstances where her repeated persuasion was ineffective, she could only agree. Besides, she was also hoping that the other party would not come. Who knew that she would still miscalculate? Now, Madame Chu's heart was at a loss. However, what was meant to come would come. When the auspicious time came, Madame Chu could not avoid it. As the host spoke, Madame Chu, the man's parent, braced herself and went on stage. Madame Chu, who was standing on the stage, did not dare to look around, afraid that she would meet Lung Ruoxue's eyes. In comparison, Chu's son was much calmer. As Chu's son led the bride into the banquet hall with the accompaniment of the wedding march, he saw Lung Ruoxue at first glance. It couldn't be helped. Lung Ruoxue's red dress was simply too dazzling. When he saw Lung Ruoxue, Chu's son was still in a daze for a moment. If it wasn't for the best man behind him gently pushing him, he would have stopped in his tracks. The beautiful bride also felt that something was wrong with Chu's senator when she followed his gaze. She almost exploded. PNDN of 1. To be more precise, he had seen photos of this woman and Chu's son together. As the current one, she was always sensitive towards the ex of the person she loved. Especially when she saw Lung Ruoxue dressed in bright red. She instinctively felt that the other party was here to cause trouble. At the thought of this, the bride held Chu Sen's arm tightly and stood up straight in a show of force. Then, she raised her head and chest and deviated from the normal route, walking towards Lung Ruoxue's table. The wedding host was dumbfounded. What was going on? This didn't happen during the rehearsal? How could the bride add scenes without permission? Chu's son was also at a loss. He let the bride pull him as he walked closer to Lung Ruoxue. Towards Lung Ruoxue, Chu Sen's heart was complicated and tangled. Who asked this face to be exactly the same as his ex-girlfriend's? Moreover, even though he was the one who broke up with the other party's sister, he still felt a little anxious even now. It could be said that at the moment of the breakup, he really felt that the two of them were not suitable for each other, and gave up the idea of changing the other party. However, after a period of separation, he still felt a little reluctant to part. This feeling was different from Ahua's. To Ahua, Song was the cinnabar in its heart that it could not get. On the other hand, Lung Ruoxue's sister, who looked exactly the same, was a treasure that he had once obtained but had no choice but to give up. Chapter 3048. Graduation Internship 2. It was precisely because of this tangled feeling in his heart that when the bride pulled him towards Lung Ruoxue's table, he actually didn't stop her. The best man and bridesmaid behind him wanted to stop them, but they were too slow. The young couple had already gone off track. The evil demon and the others didn't take it seriously at all when they saw the bride and the groom coming to their table. They didn't know much about the other party's wedding procedures and thought that it was normal. Only Lung Ruoxue was slightly surprised. However, she was very calm. The moment the bride arrived in front of Lung Ruoxue, she asked directly, "You're my husband's ex-girlfriend?" The scene was silent. Lung Ruoxue blinked, then blinked again. Was it all right to say this so directly? No. Lung Ruoxue said after a short pause. After hearing her words, the guests present suddenly recalled something and looked at Lung Ruoxue with a strange expression. Many people had long heard of Chu Sen's ex-girlfriend. After all, Chu Sen's fierce ex-girlfriend was too famous in the upper-class society. Of course, it was not a good reputation, but as time passed, they had almost forgotten about her existence. If the bride had not suddenly mentioned her today, they would not have even remembered her. But now, naturally, more people wanted to watch a good show. Am not. Even when the bride testified, Lung Ruoxue still denied it. What, are you embarrassed? You actually don't dare to admit it. The bride was a little angry. She had to make the other party admit it. Otherwise, the other party's noble appearance in a gown without saying a word would make her lose. One had to know that today was her big day. How could she allow another woman to steal her limelight? With this thought in mind, the bride had to force Lung Ruoxue to admit it. Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but smile. That smile was like 100 flowers blooming, dazzling the eyes of everyone present. The bride was so angry that she was about to explode. She was indeed a vixen, only knowing how to seduce men. Lung Ruoxue, who knew what the other party was thinking, felt that she was being wronged. However, seeing that the other party was a bride, she still greeted him. Why wouldn't I dare to admit it? I'm really not your husband's ex-girlfriend. I can't just randomly admit to other men, right? Chu-sun, what do you think? Lung Ruoxue then turned to Chu-sun and asked. She really isn't. Chu-sun, who had been in a daze, suddenly came back to his senses when he heard Lung Ruoxue's words. Why not? Do you need me to take out a photo of the two of you to compare? The bride said angrily. The person you're talking about is my sister. Lung Ruoxue, who knew that she could not count on Chu-sun, continued. Younger sister? Who are you trying to fool? The bride did not believe Lung Ruoxue's words at first, but Lung Ruoxue expressed that she had tried her best. Not wanting to continue wrangling with the bride, Lung Ruoxue directly told Chu-sun. Chu-sun, settle your woman yourself. Fun she really isn't. Hearing Lung Ruoxue's cold tone, Chu-sun couldn't help but shiver as he hurriedly replied. What, you still want to hide it from me? You think I don't know? The bride Fun was stubborn, and no one could talk her out of it. Madame Chu quickly walked over and pulled the bride over. Fun, you've got the wrong person. She and Ah Sen's ex-girlfriend are twin sisters. I've seen both of them. Thanks, but fortunately, the wedding finally went on as planned, and the wedding host also heaved a sigh of relief. Afraid that there would be any more accidents, the hosts of the wedding procedures sped up the process. Of course, this was also the Chu family's intention. After the entire process was over, it was the newlyweds' turn to toast. After toasting to many tables of brides, who had always been normal, they smoked again when they saw Lung Ruoxue and the rest eating their food gracefully. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue and the others were ignoring her, the bride was extremely unhappy. She directly snatched the wine bottle from the bridesmaid's hand and smashed it on the table. Then she shouted, I'm here to propose a toast. Upon hearing this and seeing the bride's bold and unrestrained behavior, all the guests present were a little confused. What was this? The guests couldn't understand. She already said that she wasn't your man's ex-girlfriend. Why was the bride still making a scene? It wasn't just the guests who didn't understand. Madame Chu didn't either. Madame Chu's expression was not very good. She could not understand why her noble and dignified daughter-in-law, who came from a prestigious family, treated Lung Ruoxue like her mortal enemy when she saw her. Didn't she already explain it clearly? As for Lung Ruoxue, when she saw the bride's provocation, she only smiled faintly and said, Are you going to give me a toast? Yes, do you dare to drink it? Fan asked loudly. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well and can't drink, but my man can drink in my place. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. Then drink it. The bride Fun agreed. If you let us drink a bottle, shouldn't you drink a bottle too? Lung Ruoxue asked calmly. No problem. The bride nodded her head. Today, she was finally going against Lung Ruoxue. Fun. Chu-sun couldn't help but stop her. However, Fun glared at Chu-sun in anger. Don't you care? I want to drink with her. Yup. Don't you care? Lung Ruoxue chuckled. Chu-sun was very uneasy. He knew that these people in front of him were not to be trifled with. He really didn't want Fun to go against the other, but it was obvious he couldn't stop her. Seeing that Fun had already picked up a bottle, Chusen thought for a moment before snatching the bottle from her and drinking it. A few minutes later, Chusen's face was red after he finished the bottle of wine. Lung Qingtian stood up and patted Chusen's shoulder. Young man, your alcohol tolerance is not bad. This old man will also give you a bottle. Hey, raise a toast to you. When everyone heard this, they were once again in a state of confusion. They didn't know that a toast was the trend now. At this moment, there were already stars shining in front of Chusen's eyes. However, when he saw Lung Qingtian, he still politely asked, "And you are?" "I'm Shui Er's grandfather," Lung Qingtian said with a smile. "So it's Grandpa. Come drink," Chusen said happily after hearing Lung Qingshan's self-introduction. "Yes, drink." Lung Qingtian patted Chusen's shoulder and played along. In a short while, Chusen had another bottle of wine, and his face was even redder. Lung Qingtian, on the other hand, was unaffected. After finishing the bottle, he sat down calmly. Chapter 3049. Graduation Internship 3. Lung Ruhan then stood up. 10 minutes later, everyone at Lung Ruoxia's table, except for her, toasted a bottle to Chu Senator. Unfortunately, Chu Sen collapsed heroically. The bride, Fun, paused at the sight before continuing to drink. The best men and bridesmaids felt a headache coming on. Since the groom was already drunk, the bride could not be drunk as well. Therefore, the job of drinking fell to the best man. The poor groomsmen fell down one by one under Lung Qingtian, and the others continuous drinking. In the end, only the bride and bridesmaid were left. Seeing that the other party had the intention to continue drinking, the bridesmaids also wanted to get drunk. The bride, Fun, saw that the other party's alcohol tolerance was so good, and she couldn't even hold up to him. She felt embarrassed, so she made up her mind and went to drink. After a bottle of wine, the bride passed out. At this time, there were still many tables that had not been toasted. This fact made the bridesmaids feel a collective pain in the ass. After drinking a lot of hangover soup, the bride, groom, and best men were finally woken up, and the toasting process continued. The bride also felt the severity of the situation. After she woke up, she did not cause any more trouble for Lung Ruoxia, and went to continue toasting. To Lung Ruoxia, if someone didn't offend her, she wouldn't take the initiative to offend them. Thus, she buried her head in the food she liked and didn't care about anything else. After she got pregnant, she became the king of her stomach. The Chu family's wedding banquet was not a low-end one, and many of the dishes were to her taste, so she ate happily. After a round of toasts, the bride, who was swaying as she walked, felt unhappy again when she saw Lung Ruoxia eating so happily. She went straight to Lung Ruoxia's table and shouted, "Let's continue drinking." Lung Ruoxia raised her head, feeling a little impatient. "Is there no end to this? Drink," Lung Ruoxia said helplessly, but she could not help but feel disgusted in her heart. Fun opened the bottle and started drinking. Lung Ruoxia and the rest did not say anything and just watched. After one bottle, the bride fell down again. "You still want to drink?" Looking at Chu Sun, Lung Ruoxia raised her eyebrows and asked. "No, I'm not drinking anymore." Chu Sun quickly waved his hand and hung up. Lung Ruoxia nodded and thought, "At least you know your place." However, even though Chu Sun said he wasn't going to drink, he still stood by her side and didn't want to leave. This made her quite annoyed. Looking at Chu Sun's hesitant expression, Lung Ruoxia couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter?" he asked. No, Chu Sun said softly. "He's still standing?" Lung Ruoxia was speechless. After hesitating for a while, Chu Sun finally asked, "How is she?" "Who is it?" Lung Ruoxia played dumb. "Thanks, very good," he said. Lung Ruoxia replied simply, "Then I'm relieved." Chu Sun was a little disappointed. Live well with your wife. The past is in the past." Lung Ruoxia consoled him kindly. Chu Sun nodded. He wanted to lead a good life, but he would occasionally think about it. However, Lung Ruoxia was obviously not willing to continue this topic with him. She put on a look that kept strangers away, and used her actions to chase him away. Chu Sun was still tactful. He knew that Lung Ruoxia did not like to talk to him anymore, so he did not continue to annoy her, and turned to leave. The best men naturally left with Chu Senator. However, most of these best men were Chu Sen's good friends. Hence, they were very curious about Lung Ruoxue, who looked exactly like Chu Sen's ex-girlfriend. No one could understand why Chu Sen didn't like such a beautiful and noble woman. But that vulgar woman? I heard that the sisters' names are very similar, but their personalities are different. It's really amazing. With a trace of curiosity towards Lung Ruoxue, the groomsman couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. Instantly, the demon was unhappy. Was his woman for others to see? The cold air around him was released slightly, and everyone present could clearly feel that the temperature in the room had dropped a lot. However, no one would have thought that the main culprit of the drop in temperature was a demon. Chu Sen's wedding finally ended. Madame Chu, who had been breaking out in cold sweat, could finally heave a sigh of relief. Lung Ruoxue and the rest had also become the focus of the wedding. Of course, what everyone talked about the most was still their unique mode of transportation, the bus. After that, the bus really became popular. When the crowd saw Lung Ruoxue and the rest wearing formal attire, and sitting on the big guests in a surprisingly harmonious manner, they couldn't help but try it out as well. However, they naturally wouldn't take an ordinary bus. Hence, many famous RV1 companies received orders for buses. It was naturally happy to have business, but the bus business was quite a pain in the ass for those famous RV companies. This was not their specialty. When Lung Ruoxue heard this news, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. However, she also had something to worry about. After the wedding, the bride went crazy and actually pestered her, sparing no effort to invite her to tea. What kind of tea is that? Are they close to you? Lung Ruoxue kept finding excuses to reject her, but it only made the bride fun braver and braver. In the end, Lung Ruoxue had no choice but to agree to the other party's invitation. Sitting in a high-class restaurant, Lung Ruoxue and Fan stared at each other in dismay. The demon and Chu Sen, who were sitting at the side, did not say a word. The demon didn't want to say anything, but Chu Sen didn't know what to say. Earlier on, Lung Ruoxue had already warned him to keep an eye on his wife. Unfortunately, his wife did not listen to him, and insisted on treating her to a meal and chatting. He was rather helpless about this. Yes, Fan's tea had turned into dinner, and it was Western food. Not only that, she even took the initiative to order food for Lung Ruoxue and her husband. Chu Sen's face reddened at Fan's actions. But he couldn't do anything about Fan's insistence. In reality, Fan acted on her own initiative because she didn't believe Lung Ruoxue's words. She felt that the other party was lying to her, and that Lung Ruoxue was Chu Sen's ex-girlfriend. Thus, her series of actions were all to test and verify. Lung Ruoxue understood Fan's thoughts, so she didn't expose her. She felt that since the other party didn't believe her, she would just let her verify it. Her only hope was that the other party would stop pestering her after the verification. She really didn't want to deal with such a willful woman. Chapter 30-50. The Extraordinary Principle 1. After the dishes were served, Lung Ruoxue and the demon ate their food elegantly, causing Fan's eyes to widen. The table manners of these two were too standard, even better than those of the so-called nobles. Fan felt inferior as she looked at herself. Fan watched in a daze as Lung Ruoxue and the demon finished their dishes one after another. She didn't have any appetite at all. She was too defeated. Fan suffered a huge blow, but she still didn't give up on testing Lung Ruoxue. After the meal, Fan suggested a movie. P&D 1. Co. M. After Fan's series of tests, Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer's performance was impeccable. In the end, Fan finally gave up. After settling Fan, Lung Ruoxue and the others' lives went back to normal. 2 years later, Lung Ruoxue and Monster University had graduated. Initially, the medical course required 7 years of study. However, the two of them had self-studied too quickly, and completed their studies in 4 years. This made the old professor, who had both loved and hated Lung Ruoxue and the demon, love and hate even more. Of course, what he did not know was that they had deliberately slowed down their graduation speed. Otherwise, the two of them would have graduated in less than 2 years. After they graduated, the old professor arranged for the two of them to do an internship in the largest hospital. Initially, the two of them didn't want to go, but when they heard that they didn't want to do an internship, the old professor wanted to cry in front of them. Helpless, Lung Ruoxue and the demon could only agree. However, they had also discussed the conditions with the old professor. They could do an internship, but the working hours and content would be up to their mood. The old professor would have flown into a rage if someone else had made such a request. However, the other party was his beloved disciple, and he knew how slow they were, so he didn't dare to refuse. Just like that, Lung Ruoxue and the demon became interns at the largest hospital on planet Indigo. Of course, it was just a name. On the day they entered the hospital for their internship, both of them had already discussed with the hospital director that they would only be doing it in name. They would not be on duty and would not see any patients. When the director heard what the two of them said, he was stunned for a long time and could not come back to his senses. These two could be considered as his juniors. In recent years, there were very few students who could graduate from the medical school of Netherblue University. He had been looking forward to it and had finally gotten 2 interns through the back door of the old professor. But what did these two tell him? Not working? Not seeing patients? Then wouldn't his efforts be in vain? Although his hospital was the largest on planet Indigo, it was a public hospital, so the treatment of the doctors was not the best on the entire planet. Therefore, in order to snatch 2 doctors from him, he had offended many colleagues. Now, the 2 doctors he had snatched over with great difficulty were telling him that they were not on duty and did not see patients. This would definitely not work. After being depressed for a long time, the director couldn't help but ask, "I can understand that you don't want to work, but if you don't want to see a doctor, why are you studying medicine?" "I learned it from my husband," Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. "I'm here to help my wife deliver a baby," the demon said. This was the first time the director had heard of such a thing. The old professor had not told him about this situation, so he was stunned again. While he was still in a daze, Lung Ruoxue and the demon took the opportunity to slip out of the director's office and returned home. When the dean finally came back to his senses, the 2 cunning juniors had long disappeared. Thanks no. He had to find them. After asking the old professor where Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer lived, the dean had personally come to visit. This was the first time he had come to Lung Ruoxue and the demon's residence. The dean, who had originally wanted to be calm and composed, was actually quite calm at the start. However, when he saw that other than Lung Ruoxue and the demon, the entire family was filled with handsome men and beautiful women, he could no longer remain calm. "Look at how she's grown." All of them were so handsome that one couldn't take their eyes off them. After that, he saw that the house was filled with all kinds of beasts, and it became even more chaotic. The director, who deeply suspected that he was in a zoo, didn't know how to react for a moment. However, seeing the beasts and humans getting along so well, he also felt that it was quite magical. One had to know that these beasts were all raised by others. Other than the beautiful red macaw, there was also a white tiger. Not only that, but the tiger also lived with the rabbit and the cat. This was really unbelievable. Don't tigers want to eat rabbits and cats? It could be said that the director's curiosity had been completely piqued. Even at this moment, he had forgotten his purpose for coming here, his eyes only staring at the beasts without blinking. The director looked at the beasts while Lung Ruoxue and the rest stared at the director. Song, who already knew the dean's thoughts, felt a deep disdain for this half-grown old man's thoughts. Would a tiger dare to eat it? He's got guts. Who knew who would eat who? Thinking of this, Song couldn't help snorting coldly. He glanced at Bai Su with a dangerous gaze, which immediately made Bai Zu's hair stand on end. If it sensed danger, how could it break through? Bai Su glanced at it from the corner of his eye and lowered his head again. His small body couldn't help but move closer to Lung Qingshan's feet. With Master's grandfather around, that cat probably wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous. However, it could clearly feel that the old man's gaze made the cat unhappy. Bai Su silently glared at the dean and moved to Lung Qingshan's side. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief. He was finally safe. The director had no idea why the white tiger cub was suddenly glaring at him, and he was completely baffled. However, out of his love for cute little beasts, he couldn't help but pick up a rabbit. In reality, He wanted to hug the little white tiger more, but the little white tiger didn't seem to be very friendly to him. So after thinking for a long time, he still didn't dare to make a move and picked a safe beastie to hug. Unfortunately, rabbits weren't for anyone to hug. So just as he picked up the rabbit, a certain extremely displeased rabbit stretched out its paw and scratched him. In an instant, a few claw marks appeared on the director's hand. "Arg! I've been scratched!" Immediately, a shrill scream was heard. A certain rabbit took the opportunity to jump out of the headmaster's palm. The director, who was being scratched, raised his head to look at Lung Ruoxue and the demon, feeling wronged. He repeated, "I've been scratched." Why didn't his juniors have any reaction when they saw him being scratched? It really broke his heart. Is there still love between classmates? Yes, I saw it. Lung Ruoxue nodded. Junior, I was scratched by your rabbit. You have to take responsibility. The director took the opportunity to say. Chapter 3051. Headmaster Qixiang 2. What responsibility? Lung Ruoxue played dumb. I've been scratched. The director emphasized. I saw it. It's not a serious injury. It'll be fine in 2 days. Lung Ruoxue smiled. How can it not be heavy? You're also a medical student, so you should know how serious it is to be bitten by a beast. If there's a rabies virus, you'll die. The director said with tears in his eyes. Don't worry, you won't die. Lung Ruoxue was speechless. It doesn't matter if I can die or not. I was scratched by your rabbit, so you have to be responsible for me. The dean said like a rascal. All right, I'll pay for your injection. Lung Ruoxue said helplessly. Although she really wanted to say that her rabbit wasn't sick, she could tell that the director wouldn't believe her. So she couldn't be bothered to say it. After all, an injection didn't cost much. No. When the director heard this, he immediately objected strongly. No. So, I don't need to report? Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. I can afford the injection, but your rabbit scratched me and hurt me physically and mentally, so you have to compensate me for the emotional damage. Or I'm not done with you. The director said angrily, but in his heart, he couldn't help but praise his own wit. He didn't believe that with his intelligence he couldn't get these 2 little guys who he loved and hated back to the hospital. It was the director's good idea to use the scratch to get Lung Ruoxue and the demon to work in the hospital. What a pity. He had calculated the wrong person. How much do you want? Lung Ruoxue asked curiously after hearing the headmaster's words. I don't want money. I just want you to go back to work at the hospital. The director stated his purpose. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Lung Ruoxue rejected. She had long seen through the principal's ill intentions. It was a pity that the other party was destined to fail. This was because neither she nor the demon would obediently go to the hospital for an internship. This was also the condition that they had discussed with the old professor back then. Otherwise, they would not have agreed. Why not? Your rabbit scratched me. Shouldn't you compensate me? The dean said with a face full of grief and indignation. How detestable. How detestable. How could this girl be so detestable? He was clearly trying to renege on his debt. No, he would not allow such a thing to happen. The director made up his mind. Even if he had to go back on his word, he had to get these 2 guys back to the hospital. Moreover, he had made a bet with the old professor because the old professor had reminded him before he came that he couldn't force these 2 little guys, and he couldn't put on the airs of a dean. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to achieve his goal. Before he came, he had thought of countless plans. The only thing he did not expect was to be scratched by Lung Ruoxue's rabbit. However, this seemed to be an opportunity given to him by the heavens, so he decided to seize it. But now he had seized the opportunity. However, Lung Ruoxue did not seem to want to take responsibility, nor did she feel guilty. How was he going to resolve this? But when the dean heard this, he immediately exploded. Saved? In your dreams. I don't want money, but I want people. You and your man will have to go back to the hospital tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm not done with you. The director shouted at the top of his voice. I'm not going back. Lung Ruoxue's red lips parted slightly, spitting out 2 words that were enough to make the dean vomit blood. The dean was about to explode from anger. He glared with fire spewing out of his eyes and said, "I have to. This is the compensation you're giving me. This is the compensation you asked for, but I have the right to refuse." Lung Ruoxue said, refusing to budge. "Thanks, Sumi. Where should we go?" Lung Ruoxue asked out of curiosity. "I'll sue you in court." The director was stunned by Lung Ruoxue's words and only spoke after he regained his senses. "All right. Go ahead and sue. But may I ask, Mr. Director, what is my crime?" Lung Ruoxue asked with a smile. The crime is not compensating my mental loss." The director thought for a moment and said, "Puff." Upon hearing this, Lung Qingtian and the others couldn't help but laugh. This crime was too ridiculous. Seeing that someone was laughing at him, the dean's face flushed red as he roared, "What are you laughing at? It's like this." "Yes, Director. You're welcome to sue. I'll get a lawyer to wait for you," Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. "Schwer, why are you still hiring a lawyer? I'm a law student." At this moment, Lung Ruhan spoke. Upon hearing this, the director was a little dumbfounded. Wasn't she afraid of him suing her? How did this happen? "I didn't scare him." The director was worried. Why was this little girl so difficult to deal with? Actually, before the dean came, the old professor had only told him about the conditions that Lung Ruoxue and the demon had proposed. He had not told him about his junior's personality. Otherwise, he would never have come up with such a terrible idea. Now he was in a difficult position. The heartbroken director looked at Lung Ruhan with sorrow and resentment. His eyes were full of accusations. Lung Ruhan felt so wronged. He only wanted to help his sister save some money and had no other thoughts. However, this dean seemed to hate him, but he was not afraid. Lung Ruhan, who did not take it seriously at all, picked up the teacup and sipped her tea leisurely. She did not even look at the director. Lung Ruoxue didn't bother with the director anymore. She could do whatever she wanted with this unreasonable old man. With that thought in mind, Lung Ruoxue immediately pulled the evildoer upstairs to rest. A pregnant woman can't afford to be hurt. "I'm always sleepy." Lung Ruoxue had not forgotten that she was pregnant. Hence, she would not shortchange herself. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue and the demon had returned to their rooms, Lung Qingtian and the rest exchanged glances and followed them upstairs. In an instant, only the lonely headmaster and Ji Kai were left in the large living room. Of course, there were also the spirit beasts. The headmaster, who could only stare at Ji Kai and the other beasties, was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why did they all leave? He was a guest. Was it okay to leave the guest in the living room and go back to her room? The director couldn't accept this fact, but he was interrupted by Ji Kai just as he said two words. "Director, do you really want to sue my master and his wife?" Ji Kai said helplessly. Of course." The director braced himself and said, "Then you should go back and prepare. Don't waste any more time." Ji Kai asked him to leave. After sending this guy away, he could go back and take a nap. The dean didn't want to leave just like that. He hadn't even achieved his goal yet. Moreover, what was there to sue? Who would complain to the court after being scratched by a rabbit? He just wanted to scare the little girl, but the current situation was obviously different from what he had imagined. Chapter 3052. Headmaster Qi 3. The dean felt even more worried. He couldn't help but glance at Ji Kai, but Ji Kai didn't look at him. He even turned his head to the other side. In the end, Bai Su couldn't stand it anymore and walked directly to the dean, brandishing his sharp claws and threatening him. The director's heart started to beat wildly as he looked at the white tiger cub's unkind gaze and expression. However, as an adult, he would never be frightened by a white tiger cub. Seeing that he didn't scare the other party, Bai Su roared a few more times, then opened his mouth wide and bit at the dean. This time, the dean was greatly shocked and ran away. Bai Su chased after the director relentlessly until he reached the gate, before he stopped. At this time, the director had already escaped from the courtyard. Seeing that the white tiger cub didn't chase after him, the director finally relaxed. However, he could clearly feel that the expression on the little white tiger's face seemed to be mocking him. "That's impossible, right? The other party was only a tiger? How could he make a mocking expression like a human? The director deeply felt that his eyes were playing tricks on him. This was absolutely impossible. Although he did not complete his task of persuading the white tiger to surrender today, the director was still scared when he saw the little white tiger guarding the door with a faint smile. He didn't dare to go in again, and turned back every 3 steps, leaving reluctantly. Only when the director's figure was out of sight, did Baisu turn around, and return to the living room with relief. After the dean left, he gave himself an injection, and then went to find the old professor. The old professor looked at his dejected student with an expression of understanding. Failed. The old professor said indifferently. Today is only the first day. I won't give up so easily. I believe that he'll be able to convince those 2 little fellows in time. The director, who had been depressed for a while, suddenly clenched his fists, and said as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Then I'll wish you good luck. The old professor said disapprovingly. It had been 4 years, but he had not been able to change the young couple's mind. Therefore, he believed that if he could not do it, no one else would be able to. However, the dean obviously didn't think so, so the old professor could only helplessly let him do as he pleased. The dean was also the type of person who became braver the more he was defeated. After collecting some information on Lung Ruoxue and the demon from the old professor, he left and went back to think about a battle plan. It was clear that he had already treated Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer as 2 tough bones to chew. He was determined to conquer these 2 bones. Otherwise, he wouldn't stop. The next day, the director came to visit again. Upon seeing him, Lung Ruoxue immediately asked, "Director, are you here to give me a court summons? I hope that we can resolve this in private," the hospital director said after a moment of silence. "Oh, then how do you want to dissolve it? I can consider all the other conditions except for an internship in the hospital." Lung Ruoxue laughed. "Thanks, I'm sorry, I can't agree to this request. I've already told the professor that the working hours and content are up to our mood, so we can go to the hospital whenever we want." Lung Ruoxue made her words very clear. "Even so, you can't just skip it for a day," the headmaster said with a bitter face. He had been so worried about Lung Ruoxue and the demon for the past 2 days that his hair had turned white. "Why can't I?" Lung Ruoxue blinked her innocent eyes and pretended to be confused. As a doctor, other than having a solid foundation in theoretical knowledge, what's more important is practice. You've studied for 4 years, but you only have theory, but you haven't come into contact with practice at all. You can only become a real doctor after an internship. The director persuaded him with all his heart. "We don't need practice. Theory is enough." The demon said, "It's not enough. Theory is definitely not enough. Junior, aren't you going to give birth to a baby for your junior in the future? If there was no practice, how could they deal with unexpected situations? You have to know that it's extremely dangerous for a pregnant woman to give birth. And if there's a slight mishap, it's possible for 1 person to die and 2 lives to be lost. Have you thought about all this?" The director roared with a face full of disappointment. These. The evildoer had never thought of these. After hearing the headmaster's words, the evildoer turned to look at Lung Ruoxue and asked softly, "Honey, do we need practice?" "I don't need to," Lung Ruoxue said with certainty. They were gods, and situations that ordinary people would encounter would not happen to them. Hence there was no need to worry. "Lung Ruoxue, how can you joke around with your own body?" After hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, the director was infuriated again. When Lung Ruoxue heard this, she smiled calmly and said, "Director, how could I joke about my body? We really don't need practice." Seeing how resolute Lung Ruoxue was in her words, the director couldn't help but say angrily, "You've been studying medicine for 4 years. Are you really going to waste it like this? It's not to the extent of being wasted, but it will still be useful in the future." Lung Ruoxue's smile was very rippling, but the dean did not want to see Lung Ruoxue's smile at all. It was too piercing, wasn't it? Furthermore, he was even angrier that Lung Ruoxue did not take her own body seriously. "You guys also think that they don't need any practice." Seeing that he couldn't convince Lung Ruoxue and the demon, The dean turned his attention to Lung Qingtian and the others. Lung Ruoxia's grandfather and brother were here, so they should be worried. Who knew that after he asked this question, Lung Qingtian and the others would shake their heads in unison? Instantly, the dean was so angry that he couldn't speak. After adjusting his mood with much difficulty, he still wanted to persuade others. However, Lung Qingtian and the others didn't give him the chance. Under the dean's dumbfounded gaze, they all turned around and went upstairs. The headmaster was dumbfounded. Lung Ruoxia looked at the headmaster with sympathy and said honestly, "Director, don't waste your effort. I'm the head of the family." In other words, no one could convince her. Upon hearing this, the director's worry intensified. This time, there was no need for Baisu to chase and bite him. The director left on his own like a walking corpse. For the next few days, the director did not appear, causing Lung Ruoxia to think that the other party had already given up. She was also happy to stay at home to nurse her pregnancy. Half a month later, the dean, who had disappeared for a period of time, came to visit again. This time he didn't waste any words. The moment he saw Lung Ruoxia, he immediately burst into tears. That sharp cry frightened everyone in the villa. The crowd and the beasties all looked at the headmaster in horror, very much wanting to know what he was up to. However, with a tacit understanding, the crowd and the beasts did not speak first. After crying for a while, the headmaster saw that no one was paying attention to him and stopped crying. He choked out, "You guys are really too unsympathetic. I'm crying so miserably and no one actually cares about me." Chapter 3053. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom 1. "I'm sorry we're not close to you," Lung Ruhan hurriedly said after hearing this. "Can't you care if you're not close? How can you do this?" The dean said angrily, "Of course I don't dare to care. What if you cling to us?" Lung Ruhan said matter-of-factly. Seeing the other party being so direct, the dean couldn't help but secretly think, "I just want to rely on you. You cunning guys." It was really too detestable. He had not shown himself for the past half a month. In fact, he had been thinking of a countermeasure. After thinking about it, in addition to his initial understanding of Lung Ruoxia and the evildoer, he truly felt that since the hard approach did not work, he should use the soft approach and pretend to be pitiful. However, this act of pity didn't seem to move them. This group of cold-blooded animals. The dean felt indignant. He had already visited the thatched cottage, no, the villa 3 times. How could they not be moved? When he thought of this, the director was really sad. In the end, the director made up his mind and roared, "Lung Ruoxia Yechen, I'll ask you for the last time. Are you going to do your internship in the hospital?" "I'm not going." Lung Ruoxia's will was firm. "You're not going? If you don't go, I'll ill." The director stammered, not even able to complete his sentence. How naive. He was too naive. "I'll die for you to see." The hospital director said ruthlessly. Do you have to do this?" Lung Qingtian couldn't take the director's threat. Wasn't this dean a little too weird? Why did he have to make Shui and her husband go to the hospital? Lung Qingtian could not understand. However, when Lung Ruoxia heard the headmaster's threat, she could not help but laugh. "Director, you're not anyone to me. Don't you think it's ridiculous to threaten me with death? Laughable? Are you really not going to help?" The hospital director felt uneasy. "Congratulations, you're right." Lung Ruoxia nodded. When the headmaster heard this, he stared at Lung Ruoxia's beautiful eyes, wanting to see if she was forcing herself. However, after looking for a while, he realized that this little girl's eyes were clear, and she was obviously serious. For a moment, the dean was in a difficult position again. After hesitating for a while, the director decided to take a gamble. So in the next moment, he directly crashed into the snow-white wall. Lung Qingtian took a look. What would happen if they really bumped into this? In a flash, Lung Qingtian grabbed the director by his collar and said with a speechless expression, "This dean, even if you really want to die, don't die in my house. Don't you know that this is very unlucky? These people were truly cold-blooded and heartless." Thanks he had been the dean for more than 10 years, and he was considered a person of status and position on the Indigo planet. But now, How could he be forced to this point by these two little fellows? Although everything he did was to achieve his goal, it was obvious that he would not be affected by force or persuasion. While the dean was feeling depressed, Lung Ruoxua had already made a call to the old professor. She only said that the dean wanted to commit suicide, and the old professor only heard a beeping sound. Half an hour later, the old professor arrived. First he scolded the dean. Then the old professor took the dean away. Lung Ruoxia's side finally had some peace. Without the weirdo, the director, Lung Ruoxua and the others could do whatever they wanted. After the dean was taken away by the old professor, he unwillingly followed the old professor home. When they arrived at the old professor's house, the old professor looked at the dean and couldn't help but curse. "Do you have a pig brain? You actually want to commit suicide? Professor, I'm just scaring the two kids. I'm not really going to die," the hospital director said with an embarrassed yet ingratiating smile. "Idiot. You don't have any relationship with them, so why would they care if you die or not?" The old professor was really disappointed. The dean was in his 40s this year, which was the prime age for him to do his work. The old professor had thought highly of him, but now he deeply felt that his student's IQ was really lacking. There should be some sympathy. The hospital director could not help but whisper, "There is my ass. If that pair of cold-blooded little fellows had sympathy, I would have long succeeded. You don't know. In the past 4 years, I've been fighting with those two little things many times. I've even used all kinds of cute and pitiful acts, but it's useless. Those two little things still care about me and don't put me in their eyes at all. They're already like this to me, let alone you? How many days have you known them? You want to settle them? Keep dreaming." The old professor roared. This roar also spoke the words in his heart. In fact, he was still quite balanced in his heart about the dean's defeat. Otherwise, if a certain dean had succeeded in one go, he would be depressed to death. And these thoughts in his heart also caused the dean to be dumbstruck. So that's how it is. No wonder the teacher wanted to bet with him. So the teacher was not optimistic about him at all. For a moment, the director was filled with grief and indignation. He was indignant because the professor knew the character of the two little guys, but he still tricked him into making a bet. Wasn't this clearly a trap? The dean looked at the old professor with a resentful gaze, which made the old professor feel a little guilty. However, the old professor still thickened his skin and said, "There's no point in you looking at me. I can't handle those two little guys. Otherwise, I wouldn't have agreed to their conditions. Is there really no other way?" The director asked worriedly. "I have no choice," the old professor said in a desperate manner. If you really can't do it, just give up." After a pause, the old professor continued. In any case, he didn't have any hope for the two little guys. When the director heard this, he was very reluctant. Those two little guys had very good aptitudes, and out of love for talent, he was really unwilling to give up just like that. However, he had used both soft and hard tactics and thought of all the possible solutions, but his juniors just wouldn't budge. This made him so worried that his hair turned white. After thinking for a long time, the director finally decided, "I still want to try. If you don't want to give up, then try it. But don't threaten her with suicide anymore. It's useless," the old professor warned. "I won tea," the director said, a little embarrassed. Committing suicide had almost become a disgrace to him. Sop. It was a stain that could not be washed away. After a long talk with the old professor, the dean returned home. The hospital director's wife was very surprised to see her husband in low spirits when she returned home. After asking, the madam couldn't help but laugh. The director was a little angry and glared at his wife, who was gloating over his misfortune. The hospital director's wife coughed a few times in embarrassment before she whispered something into her husband's ear. Chapter 3054. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom, 2. Immediately, the director's eyes lit up. The director looked at his wife excitedly and said, "Madam, you really are my think tank. Why didn't I think of that before? You're too thick-hearted. We women are the best at socializing," the hospital director's wife said with a little pride. "Yes, madam, I'll leave Lung Ruoxua to you. You must find a way to get her for me." The dean's eyes sparkled. Don't worry, I'll do my best. The hospital director's wife promised. The next day, the hospital director's wife personally came to visit. When Lung Ruoxue, who was in the living room with her grandfather and the rest, heard that a beautiful middle-aged woman wanted to see her, she was astonished. Other than Madame Chu, she did not know any other middle-aged women. However, she still asked Ji Kai to invite him in. The hospital director's wife entered the room. When she saw Lung Ruoxue for the first time, she was so stunned that she did not say anything for a long time. When she finally regained her senses and looked at the other people, she continued to be in a daze. The hospital director's wife only recovered after a long time. At the same time, she couldn't help but complain in her heart. Why didn't her husband tell her that this little girl was so devastatingly beautiful? She wasn't prepared for this at all. And now, she had lost her composure. The hospital director's wife looked at Lung Ruoxue with some hidden bitterness. She introduced herself and made it clear that she was only here to visit them on behalf of the hospital director. Lung Ruoxue understood why this madam had come. However, one shouldn't hit a smiling person. Since the other party had taken the initiative to come to her door to express goodwill, she couldn't just kick him out. Mrs. Hospital Director, please have a seat. Lung Ruoxue said courteously with a smile. After they sat down, the hospital director's wife could not help but look at the people in the living room again. Lung Ruoxue could only give her a simple introduction. Looking at the demon and Lung Ruoxue, the hospital director's wife couldn't help but praise them. What a golden couple. However, she was more interested in Lung Ruoxue's older brother. It was said that he was still single. It's good to be single. It just so happened that they had a daughter who had just turned 20. Looking at Lung Ruhan, the hospital director's wife was like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more she looked at her, the more satisfied she was. The principal's wife, who kept nodding at Lung Ruhan, made Lung Ruoxue and the others sense that something was not right. However, they were all smart people, so they naturally did not say anything. After the hospital director's wife sized up Lung Ruhan, she continued to bond with Lung Ruoxue. After a warm chat, the hospital director's wife reluctantly got up and left. Before they left, the hospital director's wife looked at Lung Ruhan's nostalgic eyes, which gave Lung Ruoxue and the others goosebumps. After the hospital director's wife left, everyone could not help but look at Lung Ruhan in silence. What was going on? He had been stared at by a beautiful middle-aged woman for a long time. His grandfather and the others didn't have to react like this, right? Ai. Lung Qingtian sighed heavily. Lung Ruhan felt even more helpless when she heard that. Was he being unjustly attacked? After that, Lung Qingtian could not help but ask, could that woman have taken a fancy to Ruhan? She was a married woman. That's absolutely not allowed. Thanks, Grandpa. This is impossible. Lung Ruhan's handsome face was flushed red. Of course it was from anger. Hee. I'm just making a guess. Lung Qingtian couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when he saw his grandson getting angry. Can you just guess this kind of thing? Lung Ruhan huffed. Grandson, don't be angry. If someone is interested in you, it means you're outstanding. Lung Qingtian said with a fawning smile. I don't need this kind of excellence. Lung Ruhan said gloomily. After he finished speaking, he went upstairs in a huff. Grandpa, you're really an old kid. How can you joke about this kind of thing? Lung Ruoxue was a little speechless. Her grandfather was really getting more and more mischievous as he lived. I was just trying to liven up the atmosphere. However, could it be that the hospital director's wife has really taken a fancy to Ruhan? Lung Qingtian asked curiously as he looked at Lung Ruoxue in anticipation. Yes, I do. Lung Ruoxue nodded. She just wanted her brother to be her son-in-law. Of course, Lung Ruoxue didn't explain too clearly due to her bad taste. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard this, they couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock, as if they had heard some kind of fantasy. Looking at the disbelieving crowd, Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. She then pulled the evildoer and went upstairs. Back in the room, the evildoer hugged Lung Ruoxue as they lay on the bed. He then asked in a gossipy manner, Schwer, did that old woman really take a fancy to your brother? The demon felt that based on his understanding of Schwer, If such a thing really happened, Schwerer would definitely not be nice to that woman. But now Schwerer was not angry. Yes, they have taken a fancy to him, and want him to be their son-in-law. Lung Ruoxua laughed. I knew it. Schwerer, you're getting worse and worse. Why didn't you say anything when we were downstairs? You even deliberately let Grandpa and the others misunderstand. The demon said helplessly. Schwerer was also quite mischievous. It's not fun to say it out loud. I just think that you're not young anymore. It's time for you to fall in love. Lung Ruoxua laughed. She also felt that if her brother had known about this earlier, he might have run away. Can't you let him be mentally prepared? Besides, she's just an ordinary person. Would she be suitable for your brother? After thinking for a while, the demon said, We'll only know if she's suitable after seeing her. If that girl can really make brother like her, ordinary people are not a problem at all. Lung Ruoxua smiled slyly. You're right. Schwerer, was my child well behaved today? The demon nodded and asked. He asked this question almost every day, or else he would not be at ease. Of course he's obedient. Lung Ruoxua said proudly. Good. Schwerer, let me touch you. The demon requested. No, Lung Ruoxua rejected firmly. Why won't you let me touch it? I also want to feel the existence of the baby. The demon said with some grievance. Lung Ruoxua did not answer. Instead she asked, Evildoer, do you really only want one child? She had asked the evildoer this question before. At that time, the evildoer had told her firmly that one was enough, and that there was no need to have more. It was this sentence that made her feel conflicted. If the demon found out that she had more than one child in her stomach, she didn't know if he could take the blow. It was because of this that she didn't dare to let the demon touch her, or else she would be exposed. Of course, I won't do it if you give birth to more and they fight with me for you. The demon said with certainty. Chapter 3055. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom 3. Then what if he's overthinking it? Lung Ruoxua probed. Too many? It won't. This time was an accident, and I will be very careful in the future. I will never let an accident happen again, so we will only have this one time. There will be no next time. The demons will said firmly. I'll listen to you. Lung Ruoxua said guiltily. It didn't matter if there would be a next accident. The key was this time. After confirming it, Lung Ruoxua was even more afraid to let the evildoer touch her. Hence, she could only find an excuse that she was afraid that he would scare the child. After all, the child was still young. After hearing Lung Ruoxia's reason, the evildoer was a little upset, but he did not think too much about it. The two of them chatted for a while more before he hugged Lung Ruoxua and entered dreamland. A few days later, when the headmaster's wife came to visit again, there was a beautiful young girl by her side. At first, the young lady was very reluctant. However, after seeing Lung Ruhan, the young lad's attitude changed drastically, and she became more enthusiastic towards Lung Ruoxua. This young lady was the precious daughter of the director and his wife. When the hospital director's wife returned home and told the director her idea, the director immediately made the decision. This was a good idea. Why didn't he think of this earlier? However, after the couple told their daughter their thoughts, they were strongly opposed to it. The girl was in her second year of university this year, and already had a crush on someone. Therefore, she was quite disgusted by her parents' attempt to arrange her marriage. However, the hospital director's wife was too domineering and threatened to cut off her pocket money, so she had no choice but to follow the hospital director's wife to the hospital unwillingly. However, after seeing Lung Ruhan, all the unwillingness in her heart turned into a heart full of pink heart. In the past, she used to think that the senior she had a crush on was a godlike figure to her. But compared to this man in front of her, the difference was like heaven and earth. What was a god? This was a true god. After falling in love with Lung Ruhan at first sight, the young girl became very proactive. She leaned in front of Lung Ruhan and said, "Senior, you look familiar. Have we met before? I'm afraid this young lady has recognized the wrong person. We've never met before." Hearing the young lad's words, Lung Ruhan thought for a moment and said with certainty. The young girl was a little worried when she heard Lung Ruhan's words. She was obviously trying to hit on him. Why was this man so unromantic? Maybe I'm wrong. May I ask for Senior's name? The young girl was depressed for a moment before she asked again. My surname is Lung. You can call me Mr. Lung. Also, I'm not your senior. Lung Ruhan said seriously. This time, the young girl was so depressed that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. This man was far more than just this unromantic. She's simply a dumb goose. As for Lung Ruhan, who was labeled as a dummy by her, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with his answer at all. He did not like creatures like women to begin with, so he was naturally very cold to the girl who was trying to strike up a conversation with him. However, Lung Ruoxue was clear that her brother was acting this way not only because of his personality, but also because he didn't like this little girl. The hospital director's wife was also feeling depressed. She looked at Lung Ruoxue with hidden bitterness and tried to smooth things over. Miss Lung, your brother is so introverted. Yup. Brother rarely chats with girls. Lung Ruoxue laughed. I see. After listening to Lung Ruoxue's explanation, the hospital director's wife automatically assumed that Lung Ruhan's coldness and alienation were due to shyness. She secretly decided in her heart that she would bring her daughter here often for a walk in the future. It would be fine once she was familiar with it. With this thought in mind, the hospital director's wife did not stay for long this time before she left with her reluctant daughter. After the mother and daughter had left, the evildoer and the rest came out of the room and smiled ambiguously at Lung Ruhan. Lung Qingtian was finally at ease. He could see that the hospital director's wife had a young daughter. The implications of this were self-evident. He patted Lung Ruhan's shoulder and said, Come on, Grandpa has high hopes for you. Lung Ruhan was very depressed. He did not say anything, but he did not do anything, right? What the hell? However, the others did not give him a chance to explain. After Lung Qingtian, Uncle Long and the others also patted his shoulder and went off to do their work. Lung Ruoxue looked at her brother sympathetically and gave him a helpless look. She then pulled the evildoer back to her room to teach the child. Education must start from childhood. Lung Ruoxue would never let up on this aspect of education. In an instant, Lung Ruhan was the only one left in the living room. Accompanying him were the beasts. However, none of the beasts took the initiative to pay attention to him. They only glanced at him from time to time. Lung Ruhan was depressed, so she grabbed Bai Su and Fengzhan to have a chat. However, after he talked to himself for a long time, neither of them gave him a reply. This fact made him extremely angry. Can you guys say something to me? Lung Ruhan could not take it anymore and growled. Bai Su and Fengzhan blinked their bright eyes and looked at each other. They both decided to ignore his words. Say something to me. Lung Ruhan, who was extremely angry, grabbed Bai Su and looked him in the eye. Bai Su stomped his meaty limbs and said in a low voice, Master Big Brother, Master doesn't allow us to speak, have you forgotten? There's no one else here. Lung Ruhan was speechless. Thanks in reality. They were the ones who did not want to bother with Lung Ruhan, which was why they had remained silent. Lung Ruhan was speechless after hearing Fengzhan's words. These two must be talking nonsense. Who would dare to capture you? Do you not want to live? AI. He could tell that the other party didn't want to talk to him at all. Lung Ruhan had no choice but to let these two little things go. On the other side, the hospital director's daughter followed her mother home, and she looked like she was in love with someone. She said to the hospital director's wife, Mom, I've taken a fancy to that man. I knew it. Little girl. As the saying goes, there's a thin layer between a woman and a man. Whether or not you can get such an excellent man depends on your ability. The only thing Mom can do is to build a good relationship with Lung Ruoxue. Of course, you have to think of ways to please Lung Ruoxue too. As long as you can get her to put in a few good words for you in front of her own brother, you'll definitely get twice the results with half the effort. The hospital director's wife warned. She understood her daughter's stubbornness too well. She said that because she was afraid that her daughter would accidentally offend Lung Ruoxue. If that happened, she would lose more than she gained. Mom, I know what to do. The hospital director's daughter promised. However, she did not think so. She felt that she was going to be Lung Ruoxia's sister-in-law in the future. Why would she need to please her sister-in-law? With this thought in mind, she did not go through Lung Ruoxia's path. Instead, she went straight to Lung Ruhan. On a certain day, Lung Ruhan was preparing to go home after class at the academy. When she reached the main entrance, she suddenly heard someone call her name. Then a beautiful young lady appeared in front of her. She looked at the young lady for a long time until her face turned red. In the end, Lung Ruhan said, "Miss, do we know each other?" The young girl's expression stiffened when she heard this. "Do we know each other? You bastard." Did she hear wrongly? The other party had actually asked her if they knew each other. She had to admit that this was the second time they had met since the last time they met. But it had only been a few days. The other party couldn't possibly be so forgetful that he had forgotten about her so quickly, right? The young girl was a little confused. She really wanted to scratch the wall. "You really don't remember me?" the young girl asked, unwilling to give up. Lung Ruhan shook his head honestly. He really could not remember. "In Miaoyuer. I've been to your house with my mother." The young girl gritted her teeth and warned, "Miaoyuer." Lung Ruhan repeated the young girl's name. Her extremely handsome face was still filled with confusion. "My father is the director of your sister's hospital." The young girl, who was Miaoyuer, continued to remind him. "Oh," Lung Ruhan said, as if she had come to a sudden realization. "You remember now?" Seeing Lung Ruhan's expression, Miaoyuer finally heaved a sigh of relief. If the other party didn't even remember her father, she would only be more depressed. Why are you here? I don't think you're from our school." Lung Ruhan asked in confusion. Hearing this, Miaoyuer became embarrassed. She was truly too embarrassed to say that she had come especially to look for him. "I'm here on business. I know you're at Netherblue Academy, so I came to take a look." After thinking for a while, Miaoyuer said in a reserved manner. When Lung Ruhan heard this, she quickly urged, "I see. Then quickly get to work. Don't delay the important matters." Miaoyuer secretly hated him. This man was even more unromantic than she had imagined. Why didn't he understand her hint? In reality, Lung Ruhan really did not understand. He had even forgotten that he had seen the young lady before him. So how could he have thought that she had come to the school to look for him? He wasn't that narcissistic. More importantly, he didn't have any feelings for Miaoyuer. Moreover, ever since the hospital director's wife left with her daughter, no one had mentioned this matter again for fear of angering Lung Ruhan. Even though everyone had been gossiping about it in their hearts for a long time, they did not dare to say it out loud. As such, he had long forgotten about Miaoyuer, whose name he did not even know. However, at this moment, Miaoyuer would never admit that the other party had forgotten that she was not interested in her. So after feeling depressed, she could only try to find a topic to talk about. "I'm done with my business. I'm fine now." "Oh, since you're fine, let's go home. It's not good for a girl to loiter outside," Lung Ruhan said kindly. Hearing this, Miaoyuer became even more depressed. However, she still tried her best to say, "It's still early. Oh, I saw that you had a lot of small animals at home last time. I love small animals too. Can I go to your house to have a look?" Facing Miaoyuer's expectant gaze, Lung Ruhan was in a difficult position. The beasts in his house were not ordinary beasts that could be admired by people. If he really brought her home, those beasts would probably go berserk. "I'm sorry, it's not convenient for outsiders to visit my beastie at home," Lung Ruhan rejected after some thought. An outsider. An outsider. These two words had a huge impact on Miaoyuer, and she was also very unwilling. Although she was an outsider now, she would become his wife one day. Miaoyuer clenched her fists. Chapter 3056. Girl, you've gained weight. 1. Once Miaoyuer had made up her mind, she would not give up so easily. Thus, under her coaxing and pestering, the thin-skinned Lung Ruhan could not resist her pestering skills and brought her home unwillingly. Logically speaking, he should not have given in so quickly. However, the other party was just an ordinary human. Hence, Lung Ruhan felt that he could not chase him away even if he wanted to. If he accidentally killed the other party, flowers and plants were also lives. Not to mention a human. Basically, Lung Ruhan and the others who had come to the mortal world had restrained their temper. They were not willing to destroy the entire planet Indigo in a fit of anger. Hence, as long as the other party did not cross their bottom line, they were willing to tolerate them. But now, this little girl only wanted to go to their house. Moreover, it was not like she had never been there before. Hence, even though Lung Ruhan was unwilling, he agreed after some thought. When they reached home and saw Miao Yuer, Lung Ruoxue and the rest's eyes widened. They could not hide the shock and astonishment on their faces. How could they not be shocked? Lung Ruhan, who had always kept a distance from women and knew that they had feelings for him, had actually brought a certain woman back. This was simply a fantasy. It was really too unbelievable. Initially, Lung Ruhan had no intention of bringing Miao Yuer back. In his eyes, this little girl was just the daughter of the director of the hospital where his sister had interned. But now, when he saw the surprise, disbelief, and a little pink bubbles in the eyes of the crowd, he instantly felt like scratching the wall. This feeling was really bad. The gloominess in his heart couldn't be described with words. In short, it was suffocating. It was very congested. It wasn't an ordinary traffic jam. At the thought of this, Lung Ruhan's face turned completely black. Then she pointed at Miao Yuer and said to Lung Ruoxue and the rest, "Miss Miao wanted to see our beastie. I didn't want to bring her here, but she kept pestering me, so I had to bring her here. Ji Kai, you can make the arrangements." Lung Ruhan's honest words made Lung Ruoxue and the others speechless. "Big brother, is it really good for you to be so honest? Grandson, you're too honest." Ruhan, a man who is too honest will not be able to find a wife. Everyone had their own thoughts. But Lung Ruhan did not care what they were thinking, and went upstairs directly. Ji Kai, who had been called to receive the guests, was depressed. Was it really good for young Master Han to leave this matter to him? Ji Kai sneaked a glance at Miao Yuer, whose expression was a little stiff, and felt extremely sympathetic for her. Pursuing a man who didn't understand romance was really enough for her to suffer. However, despite his sympathy, he still had to do what he had to do. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue and the others had no intention of speaking, Ji Kai took the initiative to ask, "Miss Miao, you want to see Beastie, right?" "What right?" "She was here to see someone." When Miao Yuer heard this, the anger in her heart surged up. However, what made her even sadder was Lung Ruhan's attitude. That fellow really did not put her in his eyes. Thanks, she was very depressed, but she also knew that she couldn't offend this family because of her momentary willfulness. Otherwise, she was afraid that her road to pursuing her husband would be even more bumpy. "My family's beastie all have their own personalities, so I really can't guarantee that they'll be willing to let you see them." After confirming, Ji Kai said with some difficulty. He had said the ugly words in advance, or else he was really afraid that Miao Yuer wouldn't be able to accept it. It should be known that the man's lack of interest in her had already made this little girl very depressed. If Beastie continued to ignore her, Ji Kai couldn't guarantee that this little girl wouldn't break down from sadness. Fortunately, Miao Yuer did not take his words to heart. After all, watching animals was just an excuse for her to get close to Lung Ruhan. Now, the unromantic man had returned to his room. Since she couldn't catch up with him, she had to save face, right? So at this time, the excuse of looking at animals became crucial. After Ji Kai brought Miao Yuer to the garden, Lung Ruoxue and the others heaved a sigh of relief. However, they didn't know what to say. Ah! Suddenly, a shrill scream rang out. Lung Ruoxue and the rest looked at each other before running out of the living room. When they arrived at the garden, everyone saw Miao Yuer holding one of her hands, sitting on the ground and screaming in pain. Ji Kai stood beside her expressionlessly, as if it was none of his business. Although they didn't know why Ji Kai was like this, Lung Ruoxue and the others knew that Miao Yuer must have done something to make him unhappy. Otherwise, with Ji Kai's hospitality, he wouldn't have ignored it. As the host, Lung Ruoxue took the initiative to ask, "Ji Kai, what happened?" "Madam, Miss Miao hurt Xiao Hui and was scratched by it." Ji Kai told the truth. The Xiao Hui he was talking about was the gray mini rabbit. Originally, Miao Yaer's eyes were on Baisu, but how could Baisu be willing to let a strange woman touch him? Therefore, he didn't give her the chance to pull him in. In the face of Baizu's ferocity and the other beasties' hostility, Miao Yaer naturally had to lock her gaze on the harmless little rabbit. But who knew that the rabbit was not to be trifled with? When the gray rabbit was held in Miao Yaer's arms, at first, the gray rabbit enjoyed the beautiful woman's caress. But after a while Miao Yaer suddenly thought of something. The rabbit was in pain from her grasp, and in the situation where it could not break free, it could only scratch Miao Yaer. One had to know that although the gray rabbit was the mainframe inside, since the rabbit had become its incarnation, it would also feel pain. Moreover, its skin was very thin, so how could it withstand being trampled on like this? As the saying went, when the rabbit was anxious, it would scratch people. Therefore, it didn't hold back and clawed down. Miao Yaer, who had been scratched, screamed and threw away the rabbit in her hand. She was so angry that she even kicked the rabbit a few times. The gray rabbit was quite small, so after being kicked, it naturally flew away in an arc. It was because of this that Ji Kai, who had wanted to comfort Miao Yaer, was annoyed. How could he marry a woman who didn't care about small animals? He was really too heartless. However, Miao Yaer didn't realize that she had done something she shouldn't have done. Her entire mind was on her scratched hand. When she saw Lung Ruoxue, Miao Yaer also raised her bloody hand and said angrily, "Lung Ruoxue, your rabbit scratched me." Lung Ruoxue laughed when she heard that. "My rabbit wouldn't scratch people. You must have done something." This was not Lung Ruoxue's way of shielding her, but the truth. She knew her beastie's personality better than anyone else. She would not let her beastie suffer for the sake of anyone's face. Therefore, Lung Ruoxue had no intention of letting the little rabbit admit to this crime. Chapter 3057. Girl, you've gained weight. 2. Lung Ruoxue didn't take it seriously, but Miao Yaer wasn't happy about it. She stood up from the ground with a whoosh, her face red with anger as she roared. "Lung Ruoxue, what do you mean? Could it be that I let that little beast scratch me? What I mean is that you must have done something to make my beastie unhappy, so it scratched you. I didn't say that you let it scratch you, so please don't misunderstand." Lung Ruoxue explained with a smile. "What did I do? What can I do? I only touched that little bastard a few times." After hearing this, Miao Yaer shouted again. She was really about to die from anger. Did Lung Ruoxue know who she was? She was going to be Lung Ruoxue's sister-in-law in the future. How could Lung Ruoxue treat her like this? Miao Yaer was very angry, and the consequences would be very serious. Without thinking, she called her parents. "Dad. Mom. I was scratched by a little animal. Come quickly." Lung Ruoxue and the others watched on coldly as Miao Yaer yelled into the phone. No one said anything. After she finished her phone call, everyone turned around and went back to the living room. Seeing this, Miao Yaer also entered the living room and said arrogantly, "I've already called my parents. Just wait for them to question you." Hearing this, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were speechless. It was just a scratch. Was there a need to blame? However, no one made a sound, and only allowed Miao Yaer to run around blindly. But at this moment, everyone had already denied Miao Yaer in their hearts. It would be a big problem to marry such a woman. Miao Yaer, who had been denied, would never have thought that because of her ruckus, her reserved observation opportunity had been cancelled by everyone. When the director and his wife arrived, they saw the wound on Miao Yaer's hand and felt sorry for her. However, they were not as willful as Miao Yaer, so they asked for the reason rationally. After Ji Kai explained, the two looked at each other and said, "Since it's just an accident, then forget it. Dad, Mom, how can you just let it go like this? I was scratched." Miao Yaer was unhappy when she heard this, and directly shouted at the top of her voice. When the hospital director's wife saw that her daughter was so insensible, she was so angry that she was about to die. However, she was her daughter after all, so after she gave Miao Yaer a look, she said, "Yaer, this is also your fault. If you didn't scratch that rabbit in pain, how would you have been scratched? So don't be unreasonable anymore and stay here." The hospital director's wife said all this for her daughter's good, but the furious Miao Yaer couldn't tell. She only felt that her mother had changed. She was no longer on her side. This was a fact that Miao Yuer could not accept at all. After that, he heard Miao Yuer's angry voice. "Mom, I'm your daughter. How can you help an outsider?" It was clearly that little beast who scratched me. It's fine if you don't seek justice for me, but you're still blaming me. You. When the hospital director's wife heard her daughter's words, she almost fainted from anger. She glared at Miao Yuer in exasperation. Just as she was about to continue speaking, Lung Ruoxue spoke. "Thanks, your little beast scratched me, so of course you have to compensate me for my loss." Miao Yuer said without even thinking. "You mean you want me to pay for the medical expenses?" Lung Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes and asked indifferently. "It's not just the hospital fees, it's also the fees for my mental health," Miao Yuer reminded. "Yes, no problem." Lung Ruoxue smiled and nodded. She then looked at the headmaster teasingly and said, "On this point, you and the director are indeed father and daughter. You're both thinking of the same thing." The dean's face turned red. He glared at his daughter a few times, trying to make her take back what she had just said, but would Miao Yuer listen to him? Not only that, but she also felt that her father was no longer on her side. This made Miao Yuer very sad. In fact, how could the director not side with his daughter? However, he was very clear that there was no benefit in asking Lung Ruoxue for compensation for the emotional damage she had done to him. He had definitely experienced this before. Unfortunately, Miao Yuer still couldn't understand his painstaking efforts. As for Lung Ruoxue, she pretended not to see the father-daughter pair's flirtatious gazes and continued to ask, "Miss Miao, how much compensation do you want? Name a number. You'll pay for all the medical expenses for my injury. As for the emotional damage, I don't want any money. I just want Lung Ruhan to go on a date with me," Miao Yuer said righteously. She wasn't stupid. She knew that this was definitely a good time to raise conditions, so she naturally wouldn't let it go. When the hospital director and his wife heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. They looked at Lung Ruoxue with anticipation. Although their daughter was a little willful, they felt comforted and uneasy at the same time when she thought of this. However, as parents, they naturally hoped that their daughter could get what she wanted. However, they were too uncertain because Lung Ruoxue did not look like someone who would compromise. Who knew that Lung Ruoxue would only smile after hearing that, and remain silent for a long time. It wasn't until the hospital directors and madam's hearts were beating so wildly that they almost jumped out of their chests that she calmly opened her mouth and said, "Oh, consider Miss Miao's suggestion. Now let me share my thoughts. Although my rabbit scratched you, you also kicked it away and caused that poor little rabbit to be seriously injured and on the verge of death. So, as its master, I have to seek justice for it." Lung Ruoxue continued. After she finished speaking, she deliberately paused and looked at the director and madam. The hospital director and madam's already uneasy hearts were thrown into chaos by her casual glance. However, Lung Ruoxue did not give them a chance to speak and continued. "I also want Miss Miao to compensate for my Xiaohu's hospital fees and mental damage." "What? He's just a little bastard." When Miao Yuer heard this, she was instantly enraged. "In your eyes, Xiaohui might be a little beast, but in our eyes he's our family. One had to know that all life was equal. Just because Miss Miao is a human, you want to strip away the meaning of life for other living beings?" Lung Ruoxue said righteously. At this moment, she had the aura of a charlatan, and Miao Yuer was stunned. When Miao Yuer finally came back to her senses, she angrily said, "Humans are the noblest life forms. How can those little bastards be compared to humans? Miss Miao, your way of thinking is definitely wrong." Lung Ruoxue smiled. "Where did I go wrong?" Miao Yuer asked, unconvinced. "You're wrong in your thinking. We are all living beings, and there is no such thing as high or low, even more so after death." Lung Ruoxue explained simply. After death, all living things would have to go to hell. In hell, how many would remember their past? Chapter 3058. Girl, you've gained weight. You mean we're the same after death? Miao Yuer gritted her teeth and asked. Maybe it's not even as good as these little beasts. Lung Ruoxue replied with a nod. What did you just say? How can I be inferior to those little bastards? Miao Yuer exploded. Don't you know that if you make too many mistakes while you're alive, you have to settle the score after you die? Lung Ruoxue asked in surprise. How is this possible? Miao Yuer didn't believe him at all. Lung Ruoxue did not care whether she believed her or not. She only said, let's not talk about what will happen after death first. Let's talk about what's happening now. In my eyes, you and Xiao Hui are the same, so since you've heard it, you naturally have to compensate. What if I don't? Miao Yuer didn't expect that after Lung Ruoxue's nonsense, she would still talk about this matter when she turned around. She was instantly even angrier. If you don't compensate it, then I won't compensate you with anything either. Or even now. Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. How can this be? Miao Yuer's anger rose, and she was so angry that her eyes were about to spit fire. Why can't I? Oh, I remember now, you were the one who heard it first, so my little gray is completely acting in self-defense and doesn't need to give you any compensation at all. However, you still have to pay for my little gray's medical expenses. As for the mental damage, seeing that you're also injured, I won't ask for it from you. Lung Ruoxue said as she came to a sudden realization. Miao Yuer made Lung Ruoxue so angry that she was speechless. At this time Ji Kai, who had good eyesight, carried the small gray rabbit, which was seriously injured and had only one breath left, and placed it in front of the dean and his wife. The director and his wife were at a loss for words as they looked at the little gray ball of fur that was stained red with blood. The meaning was already very obvious. He wanted them to take responsibility. Although the hospital director and his wife were very depressed, they still silently admitted their bad luck in order to maintain a good relationship with Lung Ruoxue. How should he put this? Whether he paid or not, it would be quite depressing. Now their daughter didn't even get to take advantage of them. Hence, they didn't want their daughter's willfulness to make Lung Ruoxue unhappy, or even cause them to fall out. Seeing that the hospital director and madam did not say anything, Lung Ruoxue smiled and said, now it's clear who hurt the most, so I don't need to tell you how to solve it, right? Okay, I can compensate for this little bastard's medical expenses, but what about mine? After hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, and realizing that her parents had remained silent, Miao Yuer could only save herself. My Xiao Hui was just defending himself. But for the sake of the director, I can reimburse your medical expenses. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. What about my emotional damage? Miao Yuer asked again. She was going on a date with Lung Ruhan. It's offset. Lung Ruoxue said matter-of-factly. Why? Miao Yuer shrieked, her face full of indignation. This was really bullying. Thanks, my house's Xiao Hui doesn't even want you to pay for his mental damage, so of course we won't pay for yours either. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. Alright, this matter ends here. The dean sighed helplessly. When it came to scheming, none of them were Lung Ruoxue's match. See, with this, the compensation for emotional damage would be gone. He believed that if he continued to offset the medical expenses, he would not need to pay. In reality, it wasn't that he was short on medical expenses. It was just that he felt that it was extremely unfair to let Lung Ruoxue, this little girl, gain the upper hand in everything. Therefore, although his daughter was a little willful, he could still turn a blind eye to it as long as she didn't make a big mistake under the supervision of the couple. Since the principal has said so, then this matter will end here. By the way, I'll have someone give you the medical fees after Xiao Hu's injuries are healed. Lung Ruoxue said, giving the director face. After the matter was settled, the director and his wife didn't dare to stay a moment longer. They pulled Miao Yuer and left as if they were running for their lives. After they left, the little gray rabbit that was on the verge of death actually jumped up and looked at Lung Ruoxue with a fawning expression. Master, my acting skills aren't bad, right? Not bad, continue acting. Lung Ruoxue said indifferently. The little gray rabbit was unhappy and asked, why? Just in case. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. As such, the little gray rabbit became a tragedy and was severely injured. At the same time, after the hospital director and his wife took their daughter home, they started to scold her. The hospital director's wife, in particular, had a resentful expression on her face. Mom, I didn't do it on purpose. It's all because Lung Ruhan doesn't want to talk to me at all. I was so angry that Miao Yuer couldn't help but explain. You silly child, if you cause a scene like this, I'm afraid they'll be even more unwilling to pay attention to you. The hospital director's wife glared at her daughter and said through gritted teeth, how could this be? Was it their rabbit that scratched me? Miao Yuer didn't understand. Shouldn't she be comforted when she was injured? Lung Ruhan should at least ask, right? Originally, if you didn't make a fuss they would definitely feel bad, but after what you did, they would only think that you were being unreasonable, and their impression of you would be even worse. The hospital director's wife sighed. Then what should we do? Miao Yuer was a little flustered. Even though she was a little emotional when she made a fuss, she really wanted to draw Lung Ruhan out from her room because of this. Who would have thought that Lung Ruhan did not show up even after they left the villa? Thinking of this, Miao Yuer became even more depressed. What else can we do? Of course, he had to do his best to remedy it. In the future, don't be so impulsive when you encounter problems. Use your brain, okay? And towards Lung Ruoxue, what kind of attitude is that? Remember this, if you can be with her brother, Lung Ruoxue will be your future sister-in-law. You have to please her. Otherwise, if she says a few bad things about you in front of her brother, do you still want to be her sister-in-law? The hospital director's wife scolded again. I know, Miao Yuer said. Although she didn't think much of it, after thinking about it carefully, she really had to start with Lung Ruoxue. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get close to that dumb goose. After thinking it through, Miao Yuer instantly decided that she would take the path of a sister-in-law in the future. The next day, Lung Ruoxue was surprised to see Miao Yuer at her door. He had thought that this little girl would not appear so soon because she was so angry. He didn't expect the other party to be so impatient and come again so quickly. In addition, when she saw Miao Yuer's gentle smile, Lung Ruoxue felt a gust of cold wind blow past her. She was nervous. Chapter 30:59. Girl, you've gained weight. 4. One must be up to no good. Instantly Lung Ruoxue became alert. Miao Yuer took the initiative to hold Lung Ruoxue's arm and said affectionately, Ruoxue, it was my fault yesterday. I'm here today to apologize to you. Can you forgive me? Ruoxue? Apologize? This was not normal. This was definitely not the normal seedling. Lung Ruoxue made her judgment. Although she hadn't been in contact with Miao Yuer for a long time, she was very clear that this little girl was very headstrong and wouldn't say such words easily. Such an action could only mean one thing: the other party had a motive. As for what they were after, it went without saying. Initially, Lung Ruoxue thought that it was a good thing for her brother to have some peaches. However, those peaches had to be good peaches and not rotten ones. Right now, Miao Yuer was just a rotten peach blossom in her heart. However, facing this rotten peach blossom in front of her, she didn't show it on her face. Instead, she said affectionately, what happened yesterday is already in the past. Let's not talk about it anymore. Acting. Keep acting. Let's see who can pretend better. Lung Ruoxue felt that she was quite free recently, so she was happy to put on an act with Miao Yuer. From that day on, the two of them became best friends. Miao Yuer had practically grown up in their house. Facing Miao Yuer, who said that she wanted to take care of Xiao Hui, Ji Kai was helpless. Xiao Hui was completely fine, and if she were to take care of him, what would she do if her cover was blown? But he didn't need to worry about this matter. Song had already completed it for him. What could he do? Beat up Xiao Hui. This time, Xiao Hui's feigned illness became a real illness, and he completely hated Miao Yuer. Every day, when it saw Miao Yuer busily taking care of it, Xiao Hui would not give it a good face. It even glared at her with hostility. How could Xiao Hui not hate him? He was fine at first, but now he was fine. In order to make it look like he was seriously injured, sob. Xiao Hui was so sad. How could he treat such a cute little animal like this? It was too cruel. However, Miao Yuer would never have thought that Xiao Hui hated her to death. She just thought that Xiao Hui still remembered her kicking it a few times, but she didn't care at all. After all, she had already successfully entered the inner chamber. Even though she had not spent much time with Lung Ruhan, at least Lung Ruhan would not ask her who she was when they met. This was progress. More importantly, she felt that her friendship with Lung Ruoxua had also improved by leaps and bounds. But what she didn't know was that when the evildoer saw her now, it was as if he had seen an enemy. Therefore, the evildoer had tried to persuade Lung Ruoxua to stay away from Miao Ye-er. At the end of the day, Miao Ye-er had violated his interests and hindered his time with his wife. More importantly, once Miao Ye-er arrived, all the people and animals in the villa had to be careful, in case she accidentally discovered something that she should not know. Especially the beasties, they simply didn't dare to appear rashly, afraid that they would speak human language when they weren't paying attention. That would scare people. Thanks, it was for this reason that the crowd and the beasts had unanimously decided that they must not let Lung Ruhan find an ordinary person. Lung Ruhan did not know what to say after listening to everyone's serious decision. In fact, he who enjoyed his single life had no intention of looking for a wife at all. All along, it had been others who had been worrying for nothing. What was the saying again? The emperor wasn't in a hurry, but the eunuch was. Of course, the kind Lung Ruhan would never say what was in her heart. A month later, Xiaohui was already full of energy, but Miao Ye-er still came to report every day. Everyone really couldn't stand it. This time, they didn't care what excuse Miao Ye-er was making up. They unanimously recommended Lung Qingtian to talk to Miao Ye-er. Why didn't he look for Lung Ruoxua? Because Shuer had said that they were guests and should be treated well. What else did they not understand? Shuer was bored, so she wanted to find some fun for herself. Therefore, she would definitely not take the initiative to drive Miao Ye-er away. If that was the case, they could only save themselves. The person who made the move was Lung Qingtian, Shuer and Ruhan's biological grandfather. Hence, everyone felt that since Miao Ye-er wanted to pursue Lung Ruhan, her grandfather should also please her, right? In this way, Miao Ye-er probably wouldn't dare to refute the words of her grandfather. Pnd Inov 1. Ko. And when Miao Ye-er heard this, her eyes immediately reddened, and she said with a slightly choked voice, "Grandpa, do you hate me?" Although the grandfather in front of him looked younger than his father, he was not his senior. Hence, Miao Ye-er didn't dare to treat this old man like how she treated Lung Ruoxua. Knowing that the elderly liked the weak, younger generation, Miao Ye-er immediately pretended to be pitiful after hearing the other party's words. The facts had proven that her strategy was a success. This was all thanks to the hospital director's wife's careful teaching during this period of time. It could be said that the hospital director's wife had analyzed the two close relatives by Lung Ruhan's side for Miao Ye-er and finally concluded that Lung Ruoxua's status in the Lung family was extremely high. Therefore, Lung Ruoxua was also the #1 person that Miao Ye-er had to curry favor with. Now, the first person she wanted to please didn't come out to chase her away. Instead, it was Grandpa Feng who made a move. Naturally, Miao Ye-er thought of a strategy to deal with the old man. When Lung Qingtian saw her like this, he really didn't know how to continue. If he continued, it would seem like he was bullying a child. How was he going to break this feeling? Lung Qingtian couldn't help but send out a signal for help to Uncle Long and the others who were watching from the side. However, those people were even more helpless than him. If Miao Ye-er continued to be unreasonable, they could still deal with her ruthlessly. But now she didn't make a fuss, and she didn't say anything inappropriate. She only looked at you pitifully with tears in her eyes. What could you do? Ruthlessly destroy a flower? They were not that cruel. Lung Qingtian and the others were so frustrated that they wanted to bang their heads against the wall. After a while, Lung Qingtian continued, "I don't hate you. I mean, you're still young and should focus on your studies. But look, you don't even go to school now. How can you do that? The exam is coming up, right? You want to repeat a year? I know what to do. Grandpa, you don't have to worry about me." After hearing Lung Qingtian's words, Miao Ye-er's tears turned into laughter. "I'm not worried about you. This is just an excuse to chase you away." Lung Qingtian felt depressed. At the same time, he was not too happy with the title of grandfather. Were little girls these days all so familiar with each other? He's calling me grandfather now. Chapter 3060. Girl, you've gained weight. 5. Lung Qingtian expressed his inability to accept this. However, Grandpa was just a form of address. It couldn't be decided. After thinking about it this way, he also felt relieved. However, even though he was relieved, he was still unhappy that he had not completed the mission. After that, Lung Qingshan's face involuntarily darkened. Seeing this, Miao Yuer, who already knew how to read people's expressions, quickly said, Grandpa, don't worry. I'm not worried about my studies. I've already self-studied everything I need to learn. I see. Lung Qingtian didn't know what to say anymore. The little girl had already said so much, so it didn't seem right for him to continue chasing her away. Just like that, Lung Qingtian retreated. At the same time, he began to hate the self-learning system of Planet Indigo. After Lung Qingshan's defeat, everyone had wanted to ask Uncle Long to take action. But after some thought, Uncle Long gave up. He felt that it was useless even if her own grandfather came out to drive her away. So he, an outsider, shouldn't join in the fun. She was just a little girl. Did they have to be afraid? In the room, Lung Ruoxue and the demon were well aware of this situation. However, Lung Ruoxue had never expected that her grandfather, Uncle Long, and the others would lose without even fighting. However, they couldn't be blamed for this. After all, Miao Yuer was just an ordinary human girl. The fact that they couldn't do anything to a child must have made her grandfather and the others very depressed. Shuer, did you see that? Everyone can't stand this uninvited guest. Quickly tell her not to come. The demon said to Lung Ruoxue gloomily. Did I ask her to come? I told her not to come and she won't come? Blinking her eyes, Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. I understand. The demon nodded. It was true that Shuer did not ask her to come, but Shuer did not chase her out either. Thinking of this, he gave Ji Kai a death order. When Ji Kai received the order, he looked depressed and conflicted. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the situation and asked the evildoer. What did you say to Ji Kai? I told Ji Kai not to open the door for that woman starting tomorrow. There's no one in the house. The demon said confidently. Lung Ruoxue fell silent. She really wanted to say that this was a bad idea that could only treat the symptoms, but not the root of the problem. Things didn't go as Lung Ruoxue had expected. After several days of Miao Yuer not being able to enter, she found a helper. The so-called helpers were naturally her parents. Unfortunately, the hospital director and his wife did not manage to knock on the door of Lung Ruoxue's villa. In this regard, the family of three was extremely puzzled. Was she not at home, or had she moved away? If he wasn't at home, they could still understand, but if he moved out, wasn't this a little too exaggerated? Just to hide from their daughter? The hospital director and his wife could not believe it. Of course, they did not want what they thought to become a reality. It was a pity that while dreams were beautiful, reality was cruel. Thanks, even if they didn't want to admit it, they had to accept the truth. He had indeed disappeared. Even the old professor didn't know. The hospital director and his wife were certain that there was no one in the villa, because the old professor had received a call from Lung Ruoxue. She said that they had gone on a vacation, and their return date was uncertain. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had already reached the other end of the planet. The entire planet Netherblue was divided into the east and west banks. Previously, they had stayed on the east bank, and now, they had taken a boat to the west bank. The customs and people living on the west bank were slightly different from those on the east bank. Here, it was similar to the west in Lung Ruoxue's previous life. The humans were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign species. The people were also quite enthusiastic and had a high degree of tolerance for them. Originally, Lung Ruoxue didn't want to run away in such a panic, as if she had done something bad. Unfortunately, the crowd didn't give her a chance to choose. They took her on a ship and secretly left the house while she was asleep. On a remote beach on the west coast, they found a piece of land that had no owner. After the two rabbit mainframes used hacking methods to put that piece of land under Lung Ruoxue's name, everyone settled down there. The pace of life on the west coast was obviously slower than that on the east coast, So Lung Ruoxue and the others were happy to accept such a life. Every day, grandfather and the rest would go out to sea to look for some seafood to have a sumptuous meal. They would also check out if there were any treasures in the vast underwater world. The beasts would go into the wild forest nearby. There, they were like fish in water and had a lot of fun. With that, only Lung Ruoxue and the demon were left in the huge house. The demon was simply too satisfied with such understanding people and beasts. He had to give them 20 likes. 5 years later, Lung Ruoxue was already showing signs of pregnancy. At this moment, there was only her and the demon at home. Her grandfather and the rest of the beasts had already left home to do what they liked. Although Lung Qingtian and the others were hesitant when they left, Lung Ruoxue told them to leave without worry. After all, she was very clear that she would not be able to give birth so soon. Knowing that the child of God was definitely different from ordinary humans, Lung Qingtian and the others hesitated for a long time before leaving their home reluctantly. In the past 5 years, he had been so happy that he had forgotten about home. Other than the fact that his wife's stomach was getting bigger and bigger, which made him a little uncomfortable, everything was fine. On a certain day, as usual, the demon was staring at Lung Ruoxue's stomach in a daze. He could feel the bloodline connection between the little life in her stomach and himself. However, he did not know why he suddenly felt a little irritated. "You're overthinking again," Lung Ruoxue said helplessly when she saw the demon's reaction. "Swear, I'm the one you love the most, right?" He raised his head and asked with uncertainty. "Of course." Lung Ruoxue nodded her head heavily. She realized that this evildoer's pregnancy syndrome was getting serious. Fortunately, Song wasn't around, or else Lung Ruoxue would have a bigger headache. When she thought of Song, Lung Ruoxue was shocked to realize that she had not seen her grandfather and the others for a long time. Although they would contact her from time to time, she still missed them after not seeing them for so long. "Girl, I'm back." At this moment, a familiar voice came from outside. Lung Ruoxue raised her head and saw a white light pouncing into her arms. It was so fast that even the evildoer could not stop it. Needless to say, that white light was naturally Tsong. Seeing Tsong, Lung Ruoxue was pleasantly surprised. "Speak of the devil is here." She was just thinking about Tsong. Azure actually came back. Seeing that Azure was still so small, Lung Ruoxue touched its soft fur and said happily, "You finally know to go home. If it wasn't to earn money for our baby's milk powder, I would have come back long ago." Hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, Song said arrogantly. Chapter 3061. Girl, you've gained weight. 6. What do you mean by our baby? That's my baby. The moment he heard Azure's words, evildoer was immediately indignant. "It's mine." Exploding hair Song roared. "It's mine." Even a monster was roaring, who was afraid of who. Lung Ruoxue was helpless when she saw the man and beast returning to their old ways. "Stop quarreling. I still say the same thing. The baby is mine and mine alone." Lung Ruoxue shouted back. When Evil Rampage and Azure saw him, they immediately greeted him. "We're just teasing you." After he finished speaking, he was afraid that Lung Ruoxue wouldn't believe him. So the man and beast hugged each other. Then, Song jumped into Lung Ruoxue's arms and exclaimed, "Girl, you've gained weight." Lung Ruoxue ground her teeth. As a woman, what was she most afraid of others saying? First, he was ugly. Second, he was fat. Now that Song had broken one of the taboos, Lung Ruoxue felt her anger rising as she continued to shout, "Who's fat? Who's fat? That's because my stomach is getting bigger." Stop. He couldn't hurt a pregnant woman. Song, who obviously felt that he had said something wrong, looked at Lung Ruoxue carefully and coaxed, "Girl, I was wrong. You're not fat, your stomach is really big." Azure, who could feel the little life in its stomach, suddenly felt a trace of fear. It wanted to touch it but didn't dare to. However, it definitely didn't expect that a fat person would cause such a huge stimulation to the girl. But it couldn't be blamed for this. As a beastie, it had never seen a human with a big belly. Afraid that Nyo would really be angry at it, Song obediently took the initiative to report to Lung Ruoxue what he had done in the past 5 years. It turned out that it had really gone to earn money for milk powder for the baby in Lung Ruoxia's womb. It was just that the money it had earned was a little. It was like this. Ever since Cold learned how to use the internet, and found out that it took a lot of money to raise a baby, it thought about earning some money to raise the baby. So after thinking for a long time, it left home with its 2 hacker rabbits. Of course, these 3 little beasts didn't go too far from home in the beginning, and the 2 little rabbits were best at hacking. Therefore, the 2 top hackers and a halftone began to set their eyes on some people's wealth. In Song's words, this was called robbing the rich to help the poor. It robbed the ill-gotten wealth of some unscrupulous merchants. In addition to helping itself, it also donated a lot of money to orphanages all over planet Indigo. As such, it also made a name for itself on the internet, known as the Hero Bandit. Unfortunately, Azure didn't care what others thought of it. It didn't know that the hackers on the internet had given it the name of a hero thief. The only thing it knew was that it needed a lot of money to support its child. After looting all the ill-gotten gains on planet Indigo, it turned its eyes to other planets. In this way, it was far away from home. However, what made it depressed was that the money on the major planets was not universal at all. So, after collecting a lot of wealth from the major planets, it had to find ways to exchange the useless wealth for things that could be used on planet Netherblue. It had been 5 years since it returned to planet Netherblue. After Lung Ruoxia heard this, she really didn't know what else to say other than gratitude. However, her relationship with Azure was not ordinary, so she naturally did not need to say those polite words. Azure would not want to hear them. As expected, Song, who understood Lung Ruoxia's thoughts, nodded and said, "Girl, I'm doing all this for our child. It's our child again." Thanks. After Song returned, Lung Ruoxia and evildoer's 2-person world had ended. Although the demon was depressed, he had to accept it. Because no matter Song or whoever it was, they couldn't get rid of them. When Azure returned home and discovered that Neo's stomach had grown, he immediately spread the news. PNDNOV 1. Co. M. After Jeet Song and the 2 little rabbits returned, Lung Ruhan and Qing Ju were the ones who returned home. This pair was amazing. Why were they together? One had to mention the relationship between the 2 in name. Father and son. That's right, in front of outsiders, Lung Ruhan and Qing Ju were father and son. However, Qing Ju had been captured to serve as a servant. The cause of this matter was naturally related to Miaoyuer. Lung Ruhan, who did not want to be harassed by any other woman, borrowed Green Vessel from Shue'er to be her son before she left home. When Lung Ruoxia heard her brother's plan, she was speechless. She really didn't expect that her brother would come up with such an idea in order to not be entangled with a woman. In fact, she really wanted to tell her brother that if a woman really wanted to pester him, she wouldn't care if he had a wife or children. There's a kind of woman in this world called a mistress. However, seeing her brother's confident look, she did not say anything and just gave Green Vessel to him. Her brother's life should be decided by him. Now that her brother had returned without a woman by his side, Lung Ruoxia guessed that her brother's plan had probably succeeded. Actually, what Lung Ruoxia did not know was that not only did Qing Ju take on the role of a son, he even had to play the role of Lung Ruhan's wife occasionally. He also had to be a rare beauty. The most beautiful woman Qing Ju had ever seen was his sister. However, when he transformed into her appearance, Lung Ruhan was driven mad. Who would be able to stand seeing a woman like his sister as his wife? After that, Green Vessel had even changed his appearance into fog, which made Lung Ruhan so angry that she almost beat him up. With no other choice, Green Vessel transformed into a female version of the demon. This time, Lung Ruhan did not beat him up, but she had nothing to say. Clearly, this was another character that couldn't be used. In the end, Qing Ju could only conjure up a stunning beauty based on his own imagination, and Lung Ruhan was finally satisfied. Indeed, the illusion was the safest. Big brother, welcome home. Lung Ruoxia said happily as she looked at Lung Ruhan. Shue'er, it looks like my nephew is about to give birth. Glancing at Lung Ruoxia's stomach, Lung Ruhan gently pulled her younger sister into her arms. Although the evildoer was jealous, he had no choice but to let Shue'er's brother, his brother-in-law, hug him. In this day and age, he had to please his brother-in-law. After living in the world of ordinary humans for so long, he had already been influenced by them. Yes. Lung Ruoxua nodded. Sister, you still have me. Qingju, who was not willing to be ignored, quickly said. He also wanted to hug his sister, but he was afraid of hurting her, so he did not dare to do it. Brother, how did you explain to the public that your son and name didn't grow up in 5 years? Lung Ruoxua could not help but ask curiously when she saw the little Qingju. We won't be staying in the same place for too long. Moreover, green vessel can transform, so it's easy to grow a few years older. Lung Ruhan explained. Sister, I've been so tired these past 5 years. Qingju grumbled. For the past 5 years, he had followed Lung Ruhan everywhere. Sometimes he was big, sometimes he was young, sometimes he was a man, sometimes he was a woman. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. If it wasn't for the silly cat's news that their sister's stomach was big, they probably wouldn't have made it back. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.